This is 104.7 FM. Daniel Rothman here. It's 11:43 on what started as an ordinary Tuesday night. Traffic's light, city's quiet, and if you're still awake out there, thanks for keeping me company through the graveyard shift. Emily just handed me something odd. We've got reports coming through the wire about a disturbance near the industrial docks on the east side. Nothing concrete yet, just some chatter on the emergency bands. Police are responding to what they're calling an unusual incident involving a transport vehicle. No details beyond that. Probably another smuggling operation gone wrong. We get those every few months down there. I'm going to keep an eye on this, but for now, let me get back to the music cue. Here's something to keep you awake while I dig into what's happening out there. It's now 11:58. The reports are getting stranger. Emily's been on the phone with our contact at the police department, and apparently the scene at the docks is more complicated than they initially thought. Officers arrived to find a refrigerated truck abandoned with its cargo bay doors wide open. Inside they found broken containment units, medical grade from what they can tell, and some kind of liquid residue coating the floor and walls. No sign of the driver or anyone else who might have been with the vehicle. What's interesting is that the truck itself is still running, engine on, headlights blazing, but completely empty. The registration comes back to a logistics company that doesn't seem to exist. Fake plates, fake insurance, the whole thing's a shell. Hazmat teams are being called in as a precaution. The liquid they found has an unusual smell according to first responders, something chemical but also organic. They're treating it as potentially hazardous until they know more. I'll keep you updated as information comes in. For now, if you live anywhere near the eastern industrial sector, specifically around Pier 17 and the surrounding warehouses, authorities are asking people to stay indoors until they can determine what was in that truck. 12:21 now. Emily just got off the phone with Fire and Rescue Dispatch. They're saying the hazmat situation at the docks is expanding. 3 more trucks have been located in the same general area, all abandoned, all with similar damage to their refrigeration units. Whatever was being transported in these vehicles wasn't meant to warm up. The concerning part is that witnesses reported seeing several individuals walking away from the scene around the time the first truck was discovered. Descriptions are vague but consistent. People moving in an uncoordinated manner, stumbling, appearing disoriented, or possibly injured. No one approached them because they seemed aggressive when anyone got close. Police are now treating this as both a hazmat incident and a potential medical emergency. They're trying to locate these individuals to get them assessed and treated for exposure to whatever chemical or biological material was in those trucks. The area is being cordoned off. If you're listening and you were anywhere near the docks between 10 and midnight tonight, officials are asking you to call the health department hotline. The number is on our website. They want to track anyone who might have come into contact with these individuals or the contaminated trucks. Something about this doesn't sit right. Professional smugglers don't just abandon their cargo and scatter, and 4 trucks all failing at the same time? That's not mechanical failure. That's something else. 12:47. I'm looking at social media right now, and there's footage starting to circulate from the dock area. Someone with a phone captured part of what happened before police established the perimeter. The video's shaky, taken from inside a car, but you can see one of the individuals the witnesses mentioned. The person in the footage is male, probably in his 30s, wearing what looks like industrial work clothes. He's standing under a street light and he's just swaying back and forth like he can't quite maintain his balance. Then someone off camera shouts something and the person turns toward the sound. The way he moves is wrong. His head rotates, but his body doesn't follow immediately, like there's a delay between intention and action. The video cuts off when the person filming drives away, but those last few seconds show the man starting to walk toward the car, not running, just walking, but with this determined, almost mechanical quality to his movement. Emily's trying to verify the timestamp on the video to see if this was before or after police arrival. Either way, it confirms that something medical is happening to these people. Could be chemical exposure, could be some kind of neurological agent, but they need treatment and they need it fast. 1:13 in the morning now. The situation's evolving rapidly. Hospital emergency rooms across the Eastern District are reporting an influx of patients with similar symptoms: disorientation, loss of motor control, aggressive behavior when approached by medical staff. These aren't people who were at the docks. These are individuals who had contact with the people who were at the dock. Let me be clear about what we're hearing. Someone encountered one of the exposed individuals, maybe tried to help them, and now they're showing symptoms too. The timeline is incredibly fast. We're talking about symptom onset within an hour or 2 of contact. The health department has issued a preliminary advisory. If you encounter anyone exhibiting these symptoms, do not approach them. Do not attempt to render aid. Call emergency services immediately and keep your distance. I know that sounds harsh, but until we understand what we're dealing with, that's the protocol. Emily just handed me an update from the mayor's office. They're convening an emergency meeting right now, middle of the night, pulling in department heads and medical experts. The fact that they're doing this at 1 in the morning tells you how seriously they're taking this situation. We're also hearing that federal agencies have been notified, CDC, FBI, possibly others. When you have an unknown biological agent spreading through contact in an American city, that gets attention at the highest levels very quickly. I want to stress that we don't have confirmation of what this substance is or where it came from. Everything right now is preliminary, but the speed of transmission and the severity of symptoms has people worried. This isn't normal food poisoning or environmental contamination. This is something else. 1:56 now. I need to tell you what just happened at Memorial Hospital. Emily's been monitoring the emergency services band, and we heard the whole thing unfold in real time. A patient who was brought in earlier, one of the people exhibiting those symptoms, attacked a nurse in the emergency ward. Not attacked like pushed or shoved, attacked like tried to bite. Multiple staff members had to physically restrain this person, and during the struggle, the patient bit one of the orderlies on the forearm, broke the skin, drew blood. The patient had to be sedated and is now in restraints in an isolation room. The orderly who was bitten is being treated and monitored. They've started him on broad-spectrum antibiotics and antivirals as a precaution, but nobody knows if that will help because nobody knows what they're dealing with yet. What's more disturbing is the report of the patient's condition. The attending physician described periods of lucidity followed by complete loss of cognitive function. During the lucid moments, the patient seems confused, frightened, unable to explain what's happening to them. Then something switches and they become violent, single-minded, focused only on attacking anyone nearby. 3 more hospitals have reported similar incidents. Patients brought in with exposure symptoms becoming violent, requiring restraints, attempting to bite staff and other patients. This is consistent across multiple locations, multiple individuals who don't know each other, all exhibiting the same behavioral pattern. The mayor's office just released a statement. As of 2 a.m., they're implementing a health emergency protocol. The Eastern District is under a shelter-in-place advisory. Residents are instructed to remain in their homes, lock doors and windows, and await further instructions. This is not mandatory yet, not a quarantine, but they're strongly urging compliance. All non-essential personnel in that district are being sent home from their jobs. Businesses are being asked to close. The goal is to minimize contact between people until they can get a handle on transmission. I'm looking at the map of the affected area right now. It's roughly 20 square blocks, maybe 15,000 residents, plus whoever was working night shifts in the warehouses and factories down there. That's a lot of people potentially exposed. 2:33 in the morning. The police scanner's going absolutely haywire. Multiple calls coming in from across the Eastern District, people reporting strange behavior from neighbors, from people on the streets, from family members. The descriptions are all variations of the same thing. Confusion, aggression, attempts to bite or attack. One call that just came through, a woman reported that her husband came home from his shift at the docks around 11:30. He seemed fine initially, just tired. But over the last hour, he's become increasingly disoriented. She said he doesn't recognize her, doesn't respond to his name, just keeps trying to grab her. She locked herself in the bathroom and called for help. Police are responding, but they're overwhelmed. There aren't enough units to handle the volume of calls. Emily just told me that dispatch is prioritizing calls involving immediate physical danger, but even those are stacking up faster than they can respond. Fire stations in the area are going into lockdown protocol. Apparatus bay doors are being sealed. Personnel are being instructed to remain inside the stations unless responding to a structure fire. They're not responding to medical calls in the affected zone anymore. That job's being left to specialized hazmat and medical teams. The National Guard has been activated. I just got confirmation from Emily. The governor signed the order 20 minutes ago. Units are mobilizing from bases upstate and should start arriving in the city by dawn. Their mission is to establish a secure perimeter around the affected district and prevent the spread of whatever this is. This is really happening. We've gone from a strange incident at the docks to a potential epidemic in less than 4 hours. The speed of this is unprecedented. 3:07 now. We're getting our first confirmed fatality. Details are limited. But Emily's source at the city morgue says a body was brought in from one of the hospitals. Male, mid-30s, one of the individuals initially exposed at the docks. He died despite intensive medical intervention. Cause of death is listed as multiple organ failure, but the medical examiner noted unusual tissue damage throughout the body. Here's what's strange. After death was pronounced and the body was transported to the morgue, there were reports of continued muscle spasms and movement, not normal post-mortem muscle contractions. Coordinated movement. The body had to be secured to prevent it from falling off the examination table. I know how that sounds. I'm just relaying what we're hearing. Medical personnel are trained observers. They know the difference between normal post-mortem phenomena and something unusual. This qualified as unusual enough that they reported it up the chain. The CDC team has landed at the airport, a specialized rapid response unit, apparently the people you call when there's a potential biological crisis. They're being escorted directly to a secure facility where samples from the contaminated trucks are being analyzed. We should have preliminary results on what we're dealing with within a few hours. In the meantime, the shelter-in-place advisory has been expanded to include the Central District and parts of the Western District. We're now talking about roughly 40% of the city's population being told to stay home. Schools are canceled for tomorrow. Public transportation into and out of the affected areas is suspended. The airports are still operating, but there's talk of screening protocols being implemented for anyone flying out of the city. They want to prevent this from spreading to other locations if it turns out to be highly contagious. Emily just brought me coffee, strong and black, the way I need it right now. She asked if I wanted her to line up someone to take over the broadcast, let me get some rest. I told her no, people need information right now, they need continuity, they need to know someone's paying attention and keeping them informed. I'm staying on air as long as necessary. 351. Something's happened at Memorial Hospital. We're getting fragmented reports, but it sounds like a complete breakdown of order in the emergency ward. Multiple patients and restraints somehow got free and attacked staff. They're screaming in the background of the emergency calls, people shouting for help. Sounds of chaos. Police units are responding in force, but they're being told to approach with extreme caution. The hospital's gone into lockdown mode, sealing off the emergency wing from the rest of the facility. Staff and patients in unaffected areas are being evacuated through alternate exits. Emily's trying to get more information, but the lines are jammed. Everyone's calling everyone, trying to figure out what's happening, and the communication systems can't handle the load. Cell networks in the affected area are starting to show strain. Calls are dropping, data speeds are crawling. When you have an entire district of people all trying to reach out at the same time, the infrastructure buckles. I'm advising anyone listening to conserve their phone battery and limit non-essential calls. If you need to reach emergency services, try to use a landline if you have access to one. Those systems are more robust and less likely to fail. 418 now. The situation at Memorial has stabilized somewhat. SWAT teams entered the emergency ward and managed to subdue the violent patients using non-lethal methods. Rubber bullets, tasers, physical restraint. Several officers were injured in the process, including at least 2 who were bit. Those officers are now being treated as exposure cases. They've been quarantined along with the patients and are being monitored for symptom development. The timeline suggests that if they're going to show symptoms, it'll happen within the next few hours. The hospital administrator made a difficult decision. The entire emergency ward is being sealed. Everyone inside, patients and staff, are quarantined in place until CDC can assess them. Food and supplies are being passed through a secure airlock, but no one's allowed in or out. There are 47 people in there, including 12 medical personnel who are working the night shift. I can't imagine what they're going through right now. You go to work thinking you're going to help people, and suddenly you're locked in a contaminated zone with violent patients and no clear path out. These are heroes, every one of them, doing an impossible job under unthinkable circumstances. Other hospitals in the city are going into modified lockdown. Emergency departments are still accepting patients, but with enhanced screening protocols. Anyone exhibiting symptoms associated with the outbreak is being diverted to specialized containment facilities that are being set up in converted warehouses and municipal buildings. The goal is to keep the regular healthcare system functioning for normal emergencies while isolating outbreak cases. It's a sound strategy in theory, but it requires resources and coordination we might not have. 456. Dawn's going to break in about an hour. Usually that's when the city starts waking up, when traffic builds and the morning routines begin. Not today. Today the sun's going to rise on a city in crisis, a city holding its breath, waiting to see how bad this gets. Emily just showed me aerial footage from a news helicopter that went up despite the restrictions. The Eastern District looks like a ghost town. Streets are empty except for abandoned cars and scattered debris. Some buildings have lights on, others are dark. You can see the police perimeter marked by flashing lights and barricades, a ring of authority trying to contain something they don't understand. What you can also see if you look carefully are individuals moving through the streets, Not many, maybe a dozen visible in the frame, but they're there, walking with that same uncoordinated gait we saw in the earlier videos, some alone, some in small groups. They're not running, not hiding, just moving, aimless but persistent. The helicopter was ordered to pull back. Authorities don't want media attention, potentially causing panic, but also they're concerned about what these individuals might do if they perceive the helicopter as a threat. Better to observe from ground level with trained personnel. National Guard convoys are entering the city now. Heavy vehicles, armed soldiers setting up checkpoints at major intersections around the containment zone. Their orders are clear: maintain the perimeter, prevent unauthorized entry or exit, provide security for medical and emergency personnel. Seeing military vehicles on our streets is surreal. This is our city, a place where life happens, where people build their futures, and now it looks like a war zone. All because of some smuggled cargo that nobody can explain. 5:33. The CDC has preliminary results from the sample analysis. Emily just got this from her contact who has access to the briefing materials. I'm going to read this carefully because it's technical and it's important. The substance found in the trucks is a synthetic biological compound, something that doesn't exist in nature. It's designed to interact with human cellular structures, specifically targeting regenerative pathways. The intended purpose appears to be accelerated healing, enhanced recovery from injury, maybe even age-related degeneration reversal. Military application is suspected based on the sophistication of the formula. Here's the problem. The compound was unstable. The cooling failure during transport caused a molecular breakdown that altered its properties. Instead of controlled cellular regeneration, it triggers uncontrolled cellular activity. Cells reproduce rapidly, beyond the body's ability to regulate them. This affects brain function first, overwhelming normal neural pathways with noise and disrupting cognitive processes. The reason people become violent is neurological. The parts of the brain responsible for higher reasoning, emotional regulation, and self-control are essentially short-circuited by the cellular chaos. What's left is base-level aggression and survival instinct. The biting behavior is tied to the most primitive parts of the brain, the parts that existed before we evolved language or tool use. And here's the terrifying part. The compound is transmissible through direct fluid contact. Saliva, blood, any bodily fluid can carry enough of the active agent to infect another person. Once it's in your system, the incubation period is anywhere from 30 minutes to 3 hours, depending on the exposure method and your individual physiology. There's no treatment yet. The CDC is working on it, testing various antivirals and cellular regulators. But this is uncharted territory. They're essentially trying to reverse engineer a cure for something that was never supposed to exist in this form. The infected individuals are alive, but they're not functioning as humans anymore. Their bodies continue operating, hearts beating, lungs breathing, but the person they were is gone, buried under layers of cellular disruption and neurological damage. Whether that's reversible, nobody knows. 6:04 now. The sun's coming up. I can see the first light through the studio window, that pale gray that comes before the real sunrise. On a normal day, this is when I'd be getting ready to hand off to the morning show, when I'd say goodnight to the night owls and good morning to the early risers. But there's no morning show today. The regular programming is suspended. It's just me, Emily, and whatever information we can gather to share with you. The official count of infected individuals is now at 217 confirmed cases. That's people who have shown symptoms and been documented by medical or emergency personnel. The actual number is likely much higher. People who are hiding, people who are alone, people who turned in locations where nobody witnessed it. We could be looking at thousands. The containment zone is holding for now. No reports of infected individuals breaching the perimeter, but there are reports of people inside the zone trying to get out. Families who want to evacuate, people who don't show symptoms but are terrified of staying in an area with infected individuals wandering around. The guard is under orders to refuse exit unless special circumstances apply. This is creating tension. People feel trapped, and trapped people make desperate decisions. There have been altercations at checkpoints, people trying to force their way through or sneak around barriers. So far, these have been resolved without serious injury, but it's a pressure cooker situation. You can only keep people contained for so long before something breaks. Emily tells me that social media is exploding with theories and speculation. Some people think this is a terrorist attack. Others blame government experiments, conspiracy theories about pharmaceutical companies or foreign agents. The truth, based on what we know, is probably simpler and sadder. This was criminal activity. People smuggling illegal biotech for profit, and through negligence or bad luck they release something terrible into the world. 6:41. We're getting reports of violence inside the containment zone. Not just infected individuals attacking people, but uninfected people fighting each other. Looting has started in some areas, stores being broken into, supplies being taken. When social order breaks down, when people stop believing the authorities can protect them, survival instinct kicks in and civilization becomes negotiable. Police are trying to maintain order, but they're stretched impossibly thin. You can't patrol 20 square blocks with 100 officers, not when there are infected people to avoid and panic civilians making poor decisions. The Guard is being asked to move beyond just perimeter control and start providing internal security. But that's not what they were briefed for, and it complicates their mission. There's talk of implementing a curfew, a real one, with enforcement. Anyone on the streets during specified hours would be subject to detention. The legality of that is questionable, but legality feels like a luxury right now. People want safety, they want order, and if that requires temporary suspension of certain rights, many are willing to make that trade. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, I'm just telling you what's being discussed in emergency management meetings that Emily's sources are feeding to us. The people making these decisions are trying to save lives and prevent this from spreading beyond our city. Whether their methods are appropriate, history will judge. 7:13 now, full daylight outside. The city looks different in the morning light. You can see the scope of what's happening more clearly. Smoke rising from a few locations inside the zone where fires have started and haven't been controlled. The streets are still mostly empty, but there's more movement as people wake up and try to understand what happened overnight. Television stations are broadcasting emergency information, repeating the shelter-in-place orders, showing maps of the affected areas. I'm watching one of the networks on the monitor here in the studio. They have reporters outside the containment zone interviewing people who evacuated, officials who are coordinating response efforts. Everyone looks exhausted and frightened. One thing that's becoming clear is that this isn't just our problem anymore. Emily's been monitoring national news feeds and the story has gone international. When you have an unknown biological agent causing people to become violent and spread infection through biting, that's the kind of thing that captures global attention immediately. Other countries are issuing travel advisories. Some are implementing screening protocols for anyone arriving from our country. The economic impact is going to be severe. Markets are going to react badly to this news. International trade could be affected. Tourism will collapse. But those are tomorrow's problems. Today's problem is keeping people alive and preventing this from spreading. 7:51. I need to tell you about something Emily just showed me. Video footage from inside the containment zone taken by a resident who's still in their apartment. The footage shows the street below their window. 3 infected individuals are visible, all exhibiting that characteristic unsteady movement. They're not interacting with each other, not moving in a coordinated way, just existing in the same space. Then a car appears, driving fast, trying to navigate through the empty streets. One of the infected individuals moves into the road, directly into the car's path. The driver swerves, clips the infected person, sends them spinning across the pavement. The car doesn't stop, keeps going, desperate to get out of the area. Here's what's disturbing. The infected person who is hit, they get back up, broken bones visible, one leg bending at an unnatural angle, but they get up and continue moving. The pain response is gone. The self-preservation instinct that would make a normal person stay down and protect an injury, it's not functioning. They just keep going, dragging that damaged leg, focused on whatever primitive drive is pushing them forward. This is what we're dealing with. People who can't be reasoned with, who don't feel pain, who won't stop unless physically incapacitated. How do you contain that? How do you help someone who's beyond help? The medical community is struggling with this question right now. Doctors took an oath to do no harm. But what do you do when harm reduction might mean using force against someone who's technically still alive? These are ethical questions we're not prepared to answer. 8:27. The CDC has made a recommendation to the government. Based on their analysis and the observed transmission patterns, they're suggesting a mandatory quarantine of the entire affected district. No one in, no one out, enforced by military authority. Additionally, they're recommending expansion of the quarantine to include a buffer zone around the current perimeter, catching anyone who might have been exposed but hasn't shown symptoms yet. This would effectively lock down nearly half the city. Hundreds of thousands of people confined to their homes or wherever they happen to be, waiting to see if they develop symptoms or if the situation can be brought under control. The economic and social costs would be staggering, but the alternative, allowing this to spread unchecked, could be catastrophic on a national scale. The mayor and governor are considering the recommendation. It's the kind of decision that ends political careers, but it might also be the decision that saves countless lives. I don't envy them this choice. Meanwhile, Emily tells me that hospitals outside the containment zone are preparing for the possibility of receiving infected patients. They're setting up isolation wards, training staff on containment protocols, stockpiling sedatives and restraints. They're also preparing for the likelihood of staff refusing to work if the risk becomes too great. Healthcare workers are brave, but they're also human. They have families, they have survival instincts, and asking them to expose themselves repeatedly to a potentially fatal infection is asking a lot. 9:03 now. I've been on air for nearly 10 hours straight. My voice is getting rough, my eyes are dry from lack of sleep, but I'm staying with this. Emily brought me more coffee and something to eat, though I don't have much appetite. It's hard to think about food when you're reporting on the collapse of everything familiar. The decision has been made. Mandatory quarantine goes into effect at noon. The buffer zone is being established now, pushing the containment area out another 10 blocks in all directions. People in that expanded zone are being given 3 hours to evacuate if they can prove they haven't had contact with infected individuals. After that, lockdown is absolute. This means checkpoints are about to get extremely busy. Thousands of people trying to leave before the deadline, all of them needing to be screened and processed. It's going to be chaos, and in chaos, mistakes happen. Infected individuals might slip through, or uninfected people might be trapped inside. There's no perfect solution. The National Guard is being reinforced with active military units, Marines from a nearby base, Army personnel from further out, all being mobilized and deployed to our city. The perimeter is going to become a hard barrier with lethal force authorization if anyone attempts to breach it after the deadline. They're not calling it martial law yet, but that's effectively what it is. Civil liberties organizations are already filing lawsuits, arguing that this violates constitutional protections, but those cases will take time to work through the courts, and we don't have time. The government's position is that this falls under public health emergency powers and national security provisions. Whether that holds up legally, we'll find out eventually. 9:46. The evacuation is underway, and it's even worse than anticipated. Roads leading out of the quarantine zone are jammed with vehicles. People are abandoning cars that won't move and trying to proceed on foot. Families carrying whatever they could grab, children crying, elderly people struggling to keep up. It's a refugee crisis happening in real time in an American city. The screening process at checkpoints is breaking down because there's no fast way to determine if someone's been exposed. They're relying on temperature checks and visual assessment. But the incubation period means someone could be infected and not showing symptoms yet. Every person they let through is a potential carrier, but they can't just trap everyone inside. Emily just got word that there's been a shooting at one of the checkpoints. Details are unclear, but apparently someone tried to force their way through, maybe threatened a guardsman, and shots were fired. We don't know if anyone was killed, but the checkpoint's been shut down temporarily while they sort out what happened. This is going to make people even more desperate. I'm seeing reports on social media from people inside the zone who can't get out, who either don't have transportation or can't reach the checkpoint safely because of infected individuals in the streets. They're posting pleas for help, asking for rescue, sharing their location, but there's no rescue coming. Emergency services aren't entering the zone except for critical situations, and individual evacuations aren't feasible with the resources available. Some people are talking about trying to leave through unofficial rails, cutting through buildings, or using maintenance tunnels or whatever paths they can find. Authorities are warning against this, but people are scared, and scared people don't always make rational choices. 10:21 now. Less than 2 hours until the hard lockdown. The evacuation is starting to slow as the window closes. Most people who could leave have left. What remains in the zone are those who couldn't escape, those who chose to stay for various reasons, and those who don't know the evacuation is happening because they're hiding or they don't have access to information. The military is in position. I'm looking at aerial footage showing the perimeter, and it's intimidating. Armored vehicles, barricades reinforced with concrete barriers, armed soldiers every 50 feet. This isn't a suggestion anymore. This is a hard boundary backed by military force. Inside the zone, the situation is deteriorating. More infected individuals are appearing as people who were exposed earlier start showing symptoms. Emily's tracking reports of violence, of uninfected people barricading themselves in buildings, of desperate attempts to find food and water as it becomes clear that this isn't going to be over quickly. The power grid in parts of the zone is failing. Whether it's damage from the chaos or deliberate shutdown to prevent fires from spreading, sections of the district are going dark. Once night falls, the zone is going to be a nightmare. Infected individuals moving through dark streets, people hiding in dark buildings, no light to navigate by or see danger approaching. There's discussion of establishing supply drops, using helicopters to deliver food and medicine to specific locations where uninfected people are sheltering. But that's risky. The noise and activity could attract infected individuals, and coordinating drops in an urban environment is dangerous even in normal circumstances. 11:07. Emily just received information that's going to change everything. The CDC has confirmed that the infection is mutating. Not all infected individuals are the same anymore. Some of them, particularly those who were infected early and have survived longer, are showing physiological changes beyond the initial symptom. Enhanced strength is being reported. Infected individuals who shouldn't be able to break through doors or overturn vehicles are doing exactly that. Their bodies are cannibalizing muscle tissue and rebuilding it in denser configurations, sacrificing longevity for raw power. They're literally burning themselves out, but in the process they're becoming far more dangerous. There are also reports of accelerated mutation in a small percentage of cases, individuals whose cellular regeneration has gone completely uncontrolled, resulting in grotesque physical changes, bone growth, tissue mutation, features that make them barely recognizable as human. These cases are rare so far, maybe 1 in 50 infected, but they represent a new tier of threat. The mutations seem to correlate with exposure intensity and individual biology. Someone who was drenched in the original compound versus someone who was bitten, someone with certain genetic markers versus someone without. The CDC is trying to identify patterns, but it's complicated and we're running out of time. This information is classified for now. The government doesn't want to cause additional panic, but Emily's source felt we needed to know because it changes the risk assessment. If infected individuals are getting stronger and some are mutating into something worse, the containment strategies need to adjust immediately. 11:53. 7 minutes until lockdown. The checkpoints have closed to outgoing traffic. Anyone still inside the zone is there for the duration. The final count of evacuees is around 38,000 people. That leaves an estimated 25 to 30,000 still inside, plus unknown numbers of infected. The guard is sealing the perimeter. Gates closing, barriers being locked into place, soldiers taking defensive positions. It's like watching a castle gate close before a siege, except the enemy is already inside the walls. I can hear the tension in the emergency radio chatter. Everyone knows what's coming. Once that perimeter is locked, whatever happens inside the zone is isolated from the rest of the city. The people trapped inside are on their own until either a cure is found or the infection burns itself out. Emily's been in contact with several people inside the zone, trying to provide them with information and encouragement. One woman she's been messaging with is in an apartment building with her 2 children. Her husband was at work when the quarantine was announced, and he didn't make it back before the checkpoints closed. She's alone with 2 kids, limited food, and infected people in the building below her floor. What do you say to someone in that situation? What comfort can you offer? Noon. The lockdown is in effect. The quarantine zone is sealed. 28 square blocks of urban territory, cut off from the rest of the world, containing an unknown number of infected and tens of thousands of uninfected civilians. This is now officially the largest quarantine in modern American history. The economic cost is already being calculated in the billions. The human cost is still being determined and will likely be far worse. The president is going to address the nation at 1 p.m. We'll carry that live. Until then, I'm going to take a short break, let Emily cover for a few minutes while I clear my head and figure out how to keep doing this. We're not even halfway through the first day, and it already feels like we've been at this forever. Stay safe out there. Stay informed. And if you're inside the zone and you can hear me, know that people are working to help you. Don't give up. 12:41. I'm back. Emily held down the fort while I stepped away, splashed some water on my face, tried to remember what normal felt like. It's hard to hold on to that feeling when everything around you is disintegrating. The military's established a forward command center just outside the quarantine zone. All response efforts are being coordinated from there. Medical teams, supply logistics, intelligence gathering on conditions inside the zone, all running through that central hub. They've got satellite surveillance, drone coverage, communications monitoring, trying to build a real-time picture of what's happening behind the walls they've erected. What they're seeing isn't encouraging. Infected individuals are congregating in certain areas not through coordination but through movement patterns. They tend to follow sound and motion, so anywhere there's activity, infected gravitate toward it. This creates danger zones where uninfected people who are trying to move around or find supplies are likely to encounter multiple infected at once. The mutation cases are being tracked separately. There have been 6 confirmed sightings of what they're calling enhanced infected, individuals displaying the accelerated mutation characteristics, physical changes that make them distinct from standard infected. These enhanced infected are more aggressive, faster despite their uncoordinated movement, and significantly stronger. One report describes an enhanced infected tearing the door off a car to get at the person inside. How do you fight something like that with conventional methods? Bullets work, but you need multiple hits to stop them, and even then they don't die easily. The cellular regeneration means they can survive injuries that would incapacitate or kill a normal person. Headshots are effective because you're destroying the brain tissue that's driving behavior, but that requires precision under stress. The rules of engagement for military personnel have been updated. Lethal force is now authorized against any infected individual inside the zone. No warning shots, no attempts at non-lethal intervention. It's a harsh policy, but necessary, given what we know about transmission and the enhanced infected capability. 1:18 p.m. The president's address is starting. I'm watching it on the monitor. He looks tired, older than he did in his last public appearance. The weight of this crisis is visible on his face. He's explaining the situation in broad terms, confirming what most people already know or suspect. Unknown biological agent, criminal origin, accidental release. Rapid transmission. He's calling it a national emergency and announcing deployment of additional federal resources. FEMA is taking a coordinating role. Military support is being expanded. Research into treatment and cure is the top priority. He's also addressing international concerns, assuring other nations that this is contained, that there's no risk of global spread. Whether that's true remains to be seen. We don't know if infected individuals were able to leave the city before the quarantine was implemented. We don't know if there are other shipments of the same biotech compound elsewhere. There are too many unknown. The president's calling for calm, for unity, for trust in the response efforts. He's right to do so, but words feel hollow when you're watching your city tear itself apart. People need action, need results, need something tangible to hold on to. Speeches don't stop infected people from spreading or cure the infection. He's wrapping up now, promising updates as the situation develops, asking for prayers for those affected. The broadcast ends and we're back to the emergency information loop, the maps and instructions and hotline numbers. Emily says the phone lines at the station have been ringing non-stop. People wanting information, wanting to share their stories, wanting to know if their loved ones inside the zone are okay. We can't answer most of those questions. Communication into the zone is limited and getting worse as infrastructure failed. 1:57 now. There's been an incident at the western edge of the quarantine perimeter. A group of people inside the zone, maybe 20 or 30 individuals, attempted a coordinated breach. They rushed a checkpoint, trying to overwhelm the guards through numbers and desperation. The guard held the line. Warning shots were fired, then shots into the crowd when warnings were ignored. Several people were hit, some fatally. The breach attempt failed and the survivors scattered back into the zone. It's a tragedy compounded by desperation. These were probably uninfected people, just scared and wanting out, and now some of them are dead because they made a panic choice. This is going to happen again as conditions inside the zone deteriorate. As food runs out and fear grows, more people are going to try to escape by any means necessary. The military can't let them through because each breach attempt risks infected individuals getting out, but stopping them means potential loss of innocent life. There's no good answer. The incident is being reviewed, but the standing orders remain unchanged. The perimeter must hold. Whatever it takes, wherever it leads, the infection cannot be allowed to spread beyond the quarantine zone. That's the calculus we're living with now. Some deaths to prevent many deaths. Utilitarian ethics in the harshest possible application. 2:33. Emily just got information about a situation developing inside the zone. A group of uninfected survivors have taken control of a grocery store, fortifying it and defending it against infected. They're armed, probably with weapons they found or brought with them, and they're shooting any infected that approach the building. This is vigilante survival, people taking defense into their own hands because there's no authority inside the zone to protect them. It's understandable but also dangerous. Untrained people with guns in a high-stress environment makes for unpredictable outcomes. Friendly fire, accidents, escalation with other survivor groups competing for resources. The military knows about this group but isn't intervening. As long as they're only engaging infected and not attacking other survivors, they're actually helping contain the threat. Every infected they eliminate is one less vector for transmission. It's brutal pragmatism, but it's the reality we're dealing with. There are probably other groups like this scattered throughout the zone, people banding together, finding defensible locations, trying to wait out the crisis. Some will succeed, others won't. The infected don't get tired, don't need rest, don't give up. They'll press against any barrier until they find a weakness or until they're destroyed. 3:06 p.m. We're hearing reports that supplies inside the zone are becoming critical. Stores have been looted, Food is scarce, clean water is limited in areas where infrastructure has failed. People are surviving on whatever they manage to stockpile or scavenge, but that won't last indefinitely. The planned supply drops are being prepared but won't begin until tomorrow at the earliest. The delay is due to logistical challenges and risk assessment. They need to identify safe drop zones, coordinate with survivor groups who can secure the supplies, and ensure the drops don't create situations where survivors and infected converge on the same location. Meanwhile, people are getting desperate. There are reports of violence between uninfected survivors over food and water. The social contract has broken down in parts of the zone. When you're not sure if you'll survive the next 24 hours, sharing resources becomes a lot less appealing than hoarding them. Emily's source at the command center says they're considering airlifting the most vulnerable people out: children, elderly, people with medical conditions that require ongoing treatment. It would be a complex operation requiring helicopters to land in urban areas potentially swarming with infected, but it might be worth the risk to save lives that would otherwise be lost to neglect or starvation. 3:51 now. The sun's going to start setting in a few hours. That first night was bad enough when we didn't fully understand what we were dealing with. Tonight's going to be worse. The infected have had all day to spread and multiply. The survivors have had all day to exhaust their resources in courage. Darkness is going to templify every fear, every threat, every mistake. I'm looking at thermal imaging from drones flying over the zone. The infected show up as hotspots, their hyperactive metabolism generating excess heat. You can track their movement through the streets, see them clustering around buildings where survivors are holed up. It's like watching a slow-motion siege from above, except the besiegers don't negotiate and don't retreat. One area shows a particularly large concentration of infected, maybe 40 or 50 individuals, all surrounding a structure that appears to be a parking garage. Survivors must be inside on the upper levels. The infected can't reach them, but they're not leaving either. They're just there, waiting, persistent. Eventually the survivors will run out of supplies or make a mistake, and then the infected will have them. Can we drop supplies to that group? Can we extract them? These are questions being asked at the command center, but there are no easy answers. Every intervention carries risk and resources are limited. You have to choose who to save and who to leave behind. It's an impossible calculus. 4:26. There's been a development with the CDC research efforts. Emily just got word that they've identified a potential treatment approach. It's not a cure, not something that can reverse the infection, but it might be able to slow or halt the progression if administered early enough. The treatment involves a combination of antiviral compounds and cellular regulators, basically trying to interrupt the runaway cellular reproduction before it completely destroys brain function. In lab tests on tissue samples, it showed promise. In living subjects, it hasn't been tested yet. There are no living subjects available outside the quarantine zone because everyone who's been infected is locked inside. This creates an ethical dilemma. To test the treatment, they need test subjects. That means going into the zone, capturing recently infected individuals, extracting them for experimentation. It's treating humans like lab animals, but those humans are already lost to the infection and might provide data that saves countless others. The decisions being made at levels above local authority, federal bioethics committees, legal advisors, all weighing in on whether this crosses lines that shouldn't be crossed. Meanwhile, people continue dying and the infection continues spreading. Sometimes the ethical choice and the practical choice don't align. 5:03 p.m. The light's starting to fade outside, that golden hour before sunset when everything looks beautiful and fragile. I'm watching it through the studio window and thinking about all the people watching the same sunset from inside the zone, knowing that darkness brings danger. Emily's coordinating with our social media team to maintain an active presence online. We're posting updates, answering questions where we can, trying to combat misinformation that's spreading almost as fast as the infection. There are conspiracy theories, fake cures being promoted, scammers exploiting fear to steal money or information. Crisis brings out the worst in some people. We're also collecting stories from inside the zone. People using their phones to document what they're experiencing, sending videos and messages while they still can. These accounts are valuable both as historical record and as real-time intelligence about conditions on the ground. They're also heartbreaking. Parents saying goodbye to children, people accepting that they might not survive, final messages of love and regret. One video shows a man in his apartment, maybe mid-40s, calm and composed. He explains that he was bitten several hours ago, that he can feel the infection taking hold, thoughts becoming confused, control slipping away. He's locked himself in his bathroom with the door barricaded because he doesn't want to hurt anyone when he turns. He's recording this message for his family, telling them he loves them, asking them to remember him as he was. Then he ends the video, and we don't know what happened next. That's the human cost, not statistics or infection rates, but individual people facing impossible situations with whatever courage they can muster. Each one of them matters. Each story deserves to be heard. 5:47, sunset's almost here. The temperature's dropping and thermal imaging shows infected movement patterns changing. They're becoming more active as it cools down. Their overheated metabolisms finding some relief. This means increased danger for survivors who might have felt safe during the day. The command center is implementing night protocols. Drone coverage is switching to infrared and enhanced optics. Ground patrols along the perimeter are being reinforced. Floodlights are being set up at key points, creating lit zones that might deter infected from approaching the barriers. Light doesn't harm them, but it does make them easier to target if they try to breach. Inside the zone, the situation is harder to monitor. Many areas are without power now, either from damage or deliberate shutdown. Survivors are using flashlights, candles, phone screens, whatever they have. But those light sources also act as beacons, attracting infected to their location. It's a cruel choice. Sit in the dark and risk not seeing danger approach, or use light and advertise your position to everything nearby. Emily tells me that one of the survivor groups has rigged up a generator and is running portable lights around their defended position. Smart thinking if they can maintain fuel supplies. The light creates a perimeter of visibility, lets them see infected coming and engage at range. It also makes them a target, but at least it's a prepared target. 6:19 p.m. Full dark now. The city lights outside the zone shine bright, life continuing in an almost normal way just blocks from where everything's fallen apart. The contrast is striking. People out there having dinner, watching television, living their lives while people in the zone are fighting for survival. There's resentment building about that disparity. Social media posts from inside the zone questioning why they're being left to die, why more isn't being done to help them. It's understandable anger, but it's misdirected. The people outside want to help, but the risk of wider contamination makes conventional rescue impossible. You can't send hundreds of emergency workers into an infected zone without expecting some of them to become infected themselves. The military's preparing for the possibility of having to expand the quarantine if the situation inside deteriorates beyond control. If the infected somehow breach the inner perimeter in large numbers, if the enhanced mutations become common enough to overwhelm defenses, the response would be to fall back to a secondary perimeter, essentially writing off the first zone as lost. Nobody wants that outcome, but planning for worst-case scenarios is part of crisis management. You hope for the best, but prepare for the worst, and right now, the worst is looking increasingly plausible. 6:53. There's been an attack on the northern checkpoint, not by people trying to escape, but by infected individuals attempting to breach from inside. A group of maybe a dozen infected rushed the barrier, moving with that relentless forward momentum that characterizes their behavior. The guards engaged with rifles, taking down most of the infected before they reached the physical barrier. 2 made it through the first line of defense and had to be stopped at close range. 1 guardsman was injured, clawed by an infected in the final moments before it was neutralized. The guardsman's being treated and quarantined, waiting to see if surface contact can transmit the infection. Previous data suggests it requires fluid exchange, but nobody's taking chances. This is the first organized assault on the perimeter by infected. Whether it was random chance or some vestige of pack behavior is unclear. What's clear is that the infected are learning, adapting, finding the barriers, and testing them. It's disturbing because it suggests some level of retained cognitive function, even if it's primitive and focused solely on spreading the infection. If they're learning, the situation becomes exponentially more dangerous. Static defenses work against mindless threats, but against enemies that adapt, you need active countermeasures and constant vigilance. 7:32 p.m. Emily's been monitoring communications from inside the zone, and there's something happening that nobody anticipated. Uninfected survivors are starting to organize beyond just immediate self-defense. They're forming networks, sharing information about safe routes and infected concentrations, coordinating supply distribution among multiple groups. It's grassroots community organizing in the middle of a crisis, people stepping up to fill the void left by collapsed authority. They're using mesh networks and radio frequencies that don't rely on cellular infrastructure. Someone with technical knowledge set up the system and others are maintaining it, keeping communication alive when official channels have failed. This is human resilience at its finest. When structures collapse, people build new structures. When help doesn't come, people help each other. It doesn't solve the fundamental problem of the infection, but it improves survival odds and maintains hope. Hope is critical. People can endure almost anything if they believe there's a chance of making it through. The command center is monitoring these survivor networks and occasionally feeding them information, drop locations for supplies, warnings about infected movements detected by drones. It's an unofficial partnership born of necessity. The military can't go in, but they can provide intelligence that helps survivors navigate the urban battlefield the zone has become. 8:09. We're approaching the 24-hour mark since this crisis began. One day ago, it was a normal night, routine reports about traffic and weather, nothing suggesting the world was about to change. Now we have a quarantine zone in the heart of our city, thousands of infected, thousands more trapped and struggling to survive, and no clear path to resolution. The research teams are working around the clock on that potential treatment, but even if it proves effective, manufacturing and distributing it in quantities sufficient to make a difference will take time we might not have. The infection spreading faster than response efforts can scale. There's discussion of expanding the research effort, bringing in scientists from around the world, sharing all data openly in hopes that someone somewhere has insight that cracks the problem. It would mean abandoning normal security protocols around classified biotech, but classification seems less important when the alternative is watching an infection consume a major city. International response has been mixed. Some countries are offering help. Others are sealing borders and imposing strict travel bans on anyone from our nation. The geopolitical implications are complex, but secondary to the immediate crisis. We need solutions. We need them fast, and we'll take help from anyone willing to provide it. 8:46 p.m. There's been a disturbing report from one of the survivor groups inside the zone. They've encountered infected individuals that are exhibiting hunting behavior, not just wandering and attacking whatever they encounter, but actively stalking specific targets, using cover, approaching from multiple directions in coordinated patterns. This suggests either retained intelligence or emergence of new behavioral patterns driven by the mutation. Either possibility is frightening. If infected can think tactically, even in limited ways, they become far more dangerous. Survivors who've been relying on predictability of infected movement will find themselves facing threats they're not prepared for. The enhanced infected are also becoming more common. Initial projections suggested maybe 2% of infected would develop enhanced mutations. Current observations put it closer to 8 or 10%. The mutation is accelerating, possibly because the compound is continuing to evolve as it spreads through successive infections, each generation slightly different from the last. We're dealing with something that's adapting in real time. The infected we face tomorrow might be different from the infected we face today, and traditional containment strategies that rely on understanding and predicting the threat won't work against an enemy that's constantly changing. 9:27. Emily needs to get some rest. She's been working alongside me for almost 24 hours and she's barely holding on. I've convinced her to take a few hours, sleep in the break room while one of our production assistants covers the phones and monitors. I'll keep broadcasting, keep watching, keep reporting. Someone has to bear witness to this. The studio feels different at night when it's mostly empty. The equipment hums, the lights create harsh shadows, and beyond the soundproof walls there's a city in crisis. I can feel the weight of it, the responsibility of being one of the voices keeping people informed. If I fail, if I miss something critical or spread misinformation, people could die. That's heavy, but it's also clarifying. Everything that seemed important a week ago, ratings and sponsors and career advancement, all of that's irrelevant now. All that matters is getting truth to people who need it, providing what comfort and guidance I can, and documenting what's happening so future generations can learn from our mistakes. 10:03 p.m. The first supply drop is being attempted earlier than planned. A helicopter is approaching a landing zone in the northern section of the zone where a large survivor group has secured an area. The pilot's using night vision and guidance from ground spotters to navigate. It's risky but necessary. I'm listening to the radio chatter as the operation unfolds. The helicopter descends, supplies are being pushed out, crates of food and water and medical supplies hitting the pavement. The survivor group is moving to secure the drop zone, armed individuals forming a perimeter while others grab the supplies. Infected have been drawn by the noise. The helicopter's rotors are like a dinner bell, calling every infected in audible range to investigate. The survivor group is engaging, gunfire crackling through the radio transmission. The helicopter's pulling up, climbing away as fast as possible to avoid being swarmed. The survivors got the supplies and are falling back to their secured position. Some infected were neutralized, others are pursuing, but it sounds like the operation was successful. First test of a new supply method, and it worked. There will be more drops throughout the night at different locations, keeping survivors alive and fighting. 10:48. I'm getting reports of a major fire in the southern section of the zone. Multiple buildings burning, flames visible from outside the quarantine perimeter. Fire department can't respond, can't risk crews going into the zone, so the fire's just burning unchecked. The cause is unknown, but speculation is that it started either from survivors trying to keep warm or defend positions, or possibly from infected disrupting electrical systems or fuel sources. Urban fires can spread rapidly, jumping from building to building, and with no firefighting response, entire blocks could be consumed. The residents of those buildings, if there are survivors sheltering there, they'll have to evacuate into streets filled with infected. Fire forces them out of safe positions and into danger. It's a nightmare scenario, being trapped between flames behind and infected ahead. Some people will choose the fire. At least it's a quick death. The smoke is thick enough that it's affecting visibility in that sector. Drones are having difficulty getting clear images. Thermal imaging is confused by the heat signatures from the fire. It creates a blind spot where we don't know what's happening, how many people are affected, how many infected are moving through the smoke. 11:31 p.m. Emily's back. Couldn't sleep with everything happening. She looks exhausted but determined. We're in this together now, both of us running on adrenaline and caffeine and the need to see this through. She's brought new information from the command center. They've detected unusual seismic activity in the zone, vibrations that don't match normal urban patterns. The speculation is that it's coming from infected and underground spaces, sewers or tunnels or subway passages. Large numbers moving through confined areas would create vibrations detectable by sensitive equipment. This opens up a terrifying possibility. If infected are in the underground infrastructure, they could potentially move beneath the perimeter barriers, emerge outside the quarantine zone. The tunnels weren't sealed because nobody anticipated infected would use them. Most tunnel systems have access points throughout the city. Emergency teams are being deployed to inspect and seal tunnel entrances outside the zone. It's a massive undertaking. There are hundreds of potential access points, and doing it quickly enough to prevent breaches is nearly impossible. But they have to try. If infected start appearing in uncontained areas, the whole quarantine strategy collapses. Midnight. We've crossed into a new day. Technically, it's been one full day since the crisis began, though it feels like much longer. Time distorts when you're living through something like this. Hours stretch, minutes contract. The boundary between one moment and the next becomes fluid. I'm thinking about everyone inside the zone who's lived through this day, who's survived against impossible odds, and is now facing another night of terror. What must that do to a person? How do you maintain sanity when everything around you is insane? Some will break, some will endure, and we won't know who's who until this is over. The death toll is unknown, but certainly in the thousands. Infected who were killed, survivors who didn't make it, people caught in the fire or trapped in collapsed buildings. Each death is a tragedy, but the scale makes them statistics, numbers on a board rather than individual lives. That's a failure of human compassion, our inability to hold that much grief simultaneously. But we have to remember, they were people. They had names, families, dreams, fears. They mattered. They deserved better than to die in fear and confusion while the world watched from outside barriers it erected to keep itself safe. 12:38 a.m. There's been a breakthrough of sorts with the tunnel situation. Engineering crews have identified the main passages infected could use to bypass the perimeter, and they're working on emergency sealing procedures. Collapsed sections, sealed gates, anything to block passage. It's not perfect, but it reduces the risk significantly. They're also putting monitoring systems in place, sensors that will detect movement in the tunnels and trigger alerts. If infected do try to use underground routes, there will be warning before they emerge. This is good news, relatively speaking. Every problem that gets addressed, every vulnerability that gets patched, improves our chances of containing this crisis. We're not winning, not by any measure, but we're preventing it from getting worse, and that's something. Emily's been looking at statistics on infection rates and projected spread. If current trends continue, the entire population inside the zone could be infected within 72 hours. That's everyone who's uninfected right now, tens of thousands of people, all turning into those things we've been watching stagger through the streets. The alternative is that survivors manage to isolate themselves effectively enough to avoid exposure, but that means surviving without regular supplies, without medical care, without hope of rescue for an indefinite period. It's choosing slow death by starvation over fast death by infection. Neither option is acceptable. 1:15 a.m. I need to share something personal. I've been broadcasting for almost 15 hours straight now, talking about death and infection and quarantine, staying professional and detached because that's what the job requires. But I have family in this city. My sister lives 6 blocks outside the current quarantine zone. She called earlier, scared, asking if she should evacuate further out while she can. I told her to stay put unless authorities order evacuation of her area. Moving creates risks, being on roads with panicked people potentially encountering infected if the perimeter fails. Better to shelter in place with supplies and stay informed. But honestly, I don't know if that's right. Nobody knows what the right answer is because we've never dealt with anything like this before. She's trusting my judgment because I'm supposed to know things, supposed to have access to information that helps make good decisions. But I'm just guessing, same as everyone else, trying to balance risks I can't accurately assess. If something happens to her because I gave wrong advice, I'll carry that forever. That's the burden everyone in any position of authority or expertise is bearing right now. Decisions with life and death consequences made with incomplete information, hoping for the best and knowing some people will suffer regardless of what we choose. 153. The fire in the southern sector has spread to adjacent blocks. It's a major conflagration now, visible from miles away, smoke column rising into the night sky. The heat is intense enough that it's creating its own weather patterns, winds swirling around the fire zone. Infected are being driven away from the fire, pushed into other areas where they concentrate in larger numbers. This is redistributing the threat, creating new danger zones. Survivor groups that were safe are finding themselves facing larger infected populations than before. On the other hand, the fire is eliminating infected who can't or won't move away from it. Dozens, maybe hundreds being consumed by the flames. It's a grotesque form of population control, but effective. Fire doesn't care about mutations or regeneration. High enough heat destroys tissue too quickly for any healing factor to compensate. There's dark speculation that maybe this should be the strategy: burn out sections of the zone deliberately, use fire as a weapon against the infected. It's a war crime if you're doing it to people, but are infected still people legally? Philosophically, they're alive, they're human-derived, but they're not functioning as humans anymore. Where's the line? I don't have answers to questions like that. I just know that every solution we discuss seems to involve more death, more destruction. There has to be a better way, but I don't see it, and apparently neither does anyone else. 2:31 a.m. Emily showing me drone footage from inside the zone, thermal imaging that shows the scope of what we're dealing with. The infected show up as bright spots against cooler backgrounds. There are thousands of them scattered across the entire zone, concentrated in certain areas, constantly moving. The survivor groups show up differently, clustered in specific locations, their heat signatures grouped together behind barriers or inside fortified positions. You can see the separation, the infected surrounding them, pressing against their defenses, waiting for weakness. It looks like a siege from medieval times, armies surrounding castles, except the armies don't need supply lines or rest, and the castles are running out of defenders. How long can survivors hold against an enemy that never stops, never retreats, never negotiates? Some groups are holding well. The grocery store fortification I mentioned earlier has solid defenses and good fields of fire. They're eliminating infected efficiently and maintaining their perimeter. Others are struggling, barely holding on, losing ground slowly as exhaustion and ammunition depletion take their toll. The command center is prioritizing supply drops to groups that are most at risk but showing capability to survive if supported. It's triage on a massive scale, choosing who gets resources based on survival probability. Groups that are too far gone get written off. Groups that are secure don't need immediate help. Those in the middle, those who could go either way, they're the priority. 3:07 a.m. There's been a development that changes our understanding of the infection. Medical examiner reports from early casualties are showing something unexpected. The infection doesn't just affect living tissue. It persists after death, continuing to drive cellular activity even when higher brain function has completely ceased. This means infected who are killed might not stay down. If the brain is destroyed, yes, they stop moving. But injuries that would kill a normal person, massive blood loss, organ failure, those aren't necessarily fatal to infected. Their bodies keep functioning, keep moving, driven by the infection even after they should be dead. It explains some of the reports we've been getting. Infected taking damage that should drop them and getting back up. It's not healing in the conventional sense. It's the infection refusing to let the host body stop until it's completely non-functional. Destroying the brain is the only reliable way to stop them permanently. This information is being disseminated to survivor groups and military units. Aim for the head. Don't assume a downed infected is neutralized unless you've confirmed brain destruction. It's grimmer advice than anyone wants to give, but it's necessary for survival. 3:49. The night's wearing on. I can feel exhaustion setting in, my thoughts getting fuzzy around the edges. Emily brought me something to eat, but I can barely taste it. Food is just fuel at this point, necessary to keep functioning, but not enjoyable. We're getting close to dawn again, another sunrise on a city forever changed. People who were going about their normal lives 48 hours ago are now fighting for survival or dead or infected. The speed of collapse is staggering when you really think about it, how quickly civilization's veneer cracks when the right pressure is applied. I'm reading social media posts from people inside the zone. Some are defiant, promising to survive, refusing to give up. Others are resigned, saying goodbyes, making peace with probable death. The range of human response to crisis is on full display. We're all hoping we'd be the survivors, the fighters, but nobody knows until they're tested. One post that struck me was from a teacher who's sheltering with a group of her students. Their school was in the zone when lockdown happened, and they couldn't evacuate in time. She's trying to keep them calm, maintain routine, have lessons during the day to give them normalcy. Teaching geometry while infected wander the hallways below. It's absurd and heroic and heartbreaking. 4:26 a.m., we're receiving reports of infected behavior changing as the night progresses. They're becoming more aggressive, more active, almost frenzied. Whether this is due to environmental factors or progression of the mutation is unclear, but survivor groups are reporting increased pressure, more frequent assault attempts, infected showing less of that characteristic wandering, and more focused aggression. This could be the infection optimizing the early random behaviors being replaced by more effective attack patterns. Natural selection happening in real time, except the selecting factor is which behavioral patterns lead to more successful transmission. The infected that randomly wander might persist, but the infected that actively hunt and corner prey, they're the ones that spread the infection most effectively. Evolution doesn't care about morality or suffering. It just selects for what works. And right now what works is aggressive hunting behavior. So that's what we're seeing more of. Biology doing what biology does, optimized for spread and survival, indifferent to the horror it creates. 5:03, dawn's approaching again. The sky's starting to lighten in the east, that pre-sunrise glow that promises a new day. Usually there's hope in that light, the sense of renewal and possibility. Today it just illuminates the scope of our failure. Another day of crisis, another day of people dying while we struggle to find answers. Emily's been coordinating with the command center about the day's supply drop schedule. They're planning more aggressive delivery, multiple drops across the zone, trying to reach as many survivor groups as possible. The helicopter crews volunteering for this duty are brave beyond measure, flying into a zone full of infected, landing in unsecured areas, trusting survivor groups to protect them long enough to unload cargo and escape. Some of these missions won't succeed. Eventually a helicopter will be overwhelmed, crew will be killed or infected, the asset will be lost. It's statistically inevitable when you're running high-risk operations repeatedly. But they're doing it anyway because people need help, and this is the only way to provide it. 5:39. The sun's up, I can see it through the studio windows, weak winter light spreading across the city. Normal people are waking up, getting ready for work or school, making breakfast, living their lives. Inside the zone, people are checking their defenses, counting ammunition, rationing food, preparing for another day of survival. The disparity is profound. A few blocks separate normal life from apocalyptic nightmare. The perimeter is all that stands between the two, and the perimeter is just concrete and wire and armed soldiers. It feels inadequate against what we're facing, but it's held so far. That has to count for something. I'm looking at the infection statistics Emily pulled up. Over 5,000 confirmed infected based on drone surveillance and reports from inside the zone. Unknown number of uninfected survivors. Estimates range from 15 to 20,000. The ratio is shifting steadily in favor of the infected. Eventually there will be more infected than uninfected, and then the survivors become the minority, hunted through their own city by what used to be their neighbors. 6:14 a.m. I need to tell you about something beautiful I just saw. Drone footage from inside the zone, early morning light, camera panning across a residential street. There's debris, abandoned cars, signs of violence, and right in the middle of it all there's a dog. Just a regular dog, some kind of terrier mix, walking down the street like nothing's wrong. The dog isn't infected. Animals don't seem susceptible to the compound, or at least this dog isn't showing symptoms. It's just navigating the ruins of human society, probably looking for food or its owner. innocent and oblivious to the horror surrounding it. Two infected cross the street ahead of the dog. The dog sees them, gives them space, trots past without incident. The infected don't react to the dog. They're focused on humans, on spreading the infection to human hosts. Other species aren't relevant to their drive. It's a small thing, seeing that dog alive and free in the middle of the zone. But it reminds me that life continues, that not everything is consumed by this crisis. Nature will persist beyond it. If we all fall to this infection, if the city becomes a necropolis, grass will eventually break through the pavement and trees will reclaim the buildings and life will go on without us. There's comfort in that thought, even as it underscores our mortality. 6:52. Emily's eating breakfast at her desk, going through emails and reports that have piled up overnight. I'm on my second pot of coffee, my third or fourth wind, whatever keeps you going when sleep isn't an option. The body has reserves it draws on during crisis, adrenaline and purpose overriding normal limitations. We're coming up on 48 hours since this started, 2 days that feel like 2 months. I've been on air for most of that time, taking short breaks when necessary, but always coming back, always maintaining the broadcast. People have told me they're grateful for the continuity, for having a consistent source of information in chaos. That's what I'm here for. Not just to report facts, but to provide stability. To be a voice that doesn't panic, doesn't speculate wildly, doesn't abandon post when things get difficult. Maybe that's old-fashioned thinking in an age of rapid-fire social media, but I believe in it. Someone has to be the steady presence, the reliable narrator, the person who stays calm so others can afford to feel their fear. 7:26. The CDC has an update on their treatment research. The experimental compound they developed showed promising results in lab trials. It doesn't reverse infection, but it can halt progression if administered within the first hour of exposure. That's a narrow window, but it's something. The challenge now is production and distribution, creating enough doses to matter, getting them to people who need them in time to be effective. They're fast-tracking every approval process, cutting through bureaucracy that normally takes months or years. But even fast-tracked, we're looking at days or weeks before treatment is available in meaningful quantities. For people infected today, it won't help. For people who might be exposed tomorrow or next week, it could be the difference between survival and infection. It's hope for the future, even if it can't save the present. There's also discussion of using the treatment preventatively, giving it to high-risk individuals before exposure occurs. Military personnel, medical workers, anyone who might come into contact with infected. It would provide a protection window, not perfect immunity, but better odds of surviving exposure. 8:03. The fire in the southern sector has burned itself out mostly. Some structures are still smoldering, but the major conflagration is over. The affected area is devastated, multiple blocks reduced to ash and twisted metal. Any survivors who were in that area are gone, fled or consumed by the fire or infection. The good news, if you can call it that, is that the fire created a dead zone where few infected remain. The ones that didn't flee were destroyed. It's opened up a relatively clear area that could potentially be used for supply operations or survivor evacuations. The military's considering options for exploiting this opening before infected repopulate the sector. There's also discussion of deliberate burns in other parts of the zone. Use fire as a tactical weapon to create cleared areas and eliminate infected. It's brutal and it would destroy significant portions of the city, but if it saves lives and helps contain the infection, the cost might be justified. I hate that we're having these conversations, debating whether to burn our own city to stop an infection we created through criminal negligence and bad luck. We should be better than this. We should have systems that prevent biological weapons from being smuggled through our street, but we don't. And here we are, 8:47. I'm watching footage of a supply drop that just happened in the eastern sector. The helicopter came in low, dropped crates of food and medical supplies. Survivors rushed out to secure them. Infected were drawn by the noise, but the survivors had good defensive positions and held them off while recovering the supplies. One of the survivors, visible in the drone footage, is waving at the helicopter as it climbs away. Just a simple gesture of thanks, acknowledgement of the risk the crew took to bring them help. It's human connection in the middle of inhumanity, recognition that we're all trying to help each other despite the barriers and dangers. These moments matter. They're what separate us from the infected, that capacity for gratitude and cooperation and mutual support. The infected operate on pure aggression and transmission imperative. We have choice, compassion, the ability to sacrifice for others. That's what we're fighting to preserve. 9:21. Emily's phone is ringing constantly. Media requests, government officials, people desperate for information about loved ones inside the zone. She's handling each call with patience and professionalism, even though she's running on fumes. Same as me, I don't know how she does it, but I'm grateful she's here. One call she just took was from a woman whose son is inside the zone. He's been sending her text messages periodically letting her know he's alive, describing his situation. The last message came 2 hours ago saying he was running low on food and water, asking if there was any word on when they might be able to leave. Emily had to tell her there's no timeline for ending the quarantine, that it could be days or weeks or longer. The woman started crying. Emily stayed on the line, didn't rush her, just let her cry and offered what comfort she could. There's no training that prepares you for conversations like that, but Emily handled it with grace. When the call ended, she sat for a moment, collected herself, then moved on to the next crisis requiring attention. I've worked with Emily for 3 years, and I've always respected her competence. Today I'm seeing her heroism. It's quieter than military valor, less dramatic than life-saving interventions, but it's heroism nonetheless. Staying present for people in pain, maintaining composure when you want to break down, continuing to function when every instinct says to flee or hide, that takes strength. 10:08. The command center is reporting unusual activity in the northwestern section of the zone. Infected are gathering in large numbers, not randomly, but in coordinated movement toward a specific location. Drones show maybe 200 infected converging on what appears to be a fortified apartment building where survivors are sheltering. This is organized behavior on a scale we haven't seen before. Individual infected have shown hunting patterns, but this looks like a coordinated assault. Neither there's communication happening between infected that we don't understand, or the mutation has progressed to include some form of collective behavior. The survivor group in that building is in serious danger. 200 infected pressing against their defenses simultaneously could overwhelm even well-prepared positions. The command center is scrambling to provide support, considering options for aerial intervention or distraction tactics to draw infected away. Emily's trying to establish communication with the survivor group to assess their situation and coordinate response. If they have enough ammunition and defensible positions, they might be able to hold. If not, they need to evacuate immediately or they'll be overrun. 10:43. The situation at the apartment building is deteriorating. The survivor group is in contact now, and they're reporting infected breaking through ground floor defenses. They've fallen back to upper floors and are barricading stairwells, but it's only a matter of time before infected break through. There are 37 people in that building, including children. They're begging for extraction, for any kind of help. A helicopter is being dispatched, but it's 15 minutes out and it's unclear if they can hold that long. The building's roof isn't ideal for helicopter landing, but it's the only option. I'm listening to the radio chatter, the desperation in voices of people who know they're running out of time. The sound of gunfire in the background, shouting, something heavy impacting a door repeatedly, infected trying to break through, survivors trying to hold them back, minutes ticking away. The helicopter's pilot is pushing the aircraft to its limits, trying to cut response time. Every second matters. Every delay could mean the difference between rescue and tragedy. I'm sitting here powerless, listening, praying they make it, knowing that prayer doesn't stop infected or make helicopters fly faster. 11:07. The helicopter reached the building. The survivors made it to the roof, all 37 of them, children being carried by adults, everyone moving as fast as possible. The infected broke through the final barricade just as the last person climbed onto the roof access ladder. The helicopter couldn't land, roof structure wasn't stable enough, so they're doing a hover extraction, lowering a rescue basket, pulling people up one or two at a time. It's slow, agonizingly slow, and infected are pouring onto the roof now, coming up through the access door the survivors couldn't secure. The helicopter crew is armed, firing at infected trying to reach the survivors waiting for extraction. The pilot's holding position despite the risk, despite infected reaching up toward the aircraft trying to grab landing skids. People are being loaded into the basket, pulled up, loaded into the helicopter cabin. Children first, then injured, then whoever's next in line. Some of the survivors are staying at the edge of the roof, holding off infected with whatever weapons they have, buying time for others to escape. They know they might not make it out themselves, but they're fighting anyway, sacrificing so others can live. It's the best of humanity on display in the worst possible circumstances. 11:34, 29 survivors were extracted, 8 didn't make it. The infected overwhelmed the defensive line and people fell or were pulled down or chose to jump rather than be torn apart. The helicopter had to pull away before everyone was rescued because infected were about to compromise the aircraft. The pilot made an impossible choice. Leave immediately and save the people already on board, or stay and risk losing everyone including the crew. He left. 8 people watched the helicopter climb away while infected closed in around them. I can't imagine what that moment felt like for anyone involved. The helicopter's returning to base with 29 refugees from the zone, including 6 children who watched adults die to save them. Those children are going to carry this trauma for the rest of their lives. Nightmares and survivor's guilt, and the knowledge of what people paid for their survival. We saved them from the infection, but we can't save them from the psychological scars. Emily's crying, not making noise, but I can see tears on her cheeks as she monitors the situation. She's human, and this is human horror, and sometimes the only appropriate response is tears. I want to cry too, but I'm on air. I'm the voice that has to stay steady, so I swallow it down and keep talking and promise myself I'll process this later when there's time. Noon, the sun's high. Another day in full swing outside the zone. Inside, the situation continues to deteriorate. More buildings are being overrun, more survivor groups are falling, more infected are roaming streets that were once part of a living city. The balance is tipping toward the infected, and we don't have tools to tip it back. The military's considering more aggressive intervention. Not going into the zone with ground forces, that's still too risky, but using artillery or airstrikes to eliminate large concentrations of infected. It would mean accepting collateral damage, accepting that some survivors might be caught in bombardment, but it might be necessary to prevent the situation from becoming completely uncontrollable. These are war-making decisions applied to a domestic crisis, using military weapons against American civilians, even infected civilians, on American soil. The legal and ethical frameworks don't exist for this situation. We're improvising, making judgments that will be analyzed and criticized for generations, hoping we're choosing the least bad option from a menu of horrors. 12:36 p.m. I need to step away for a few minutes. Emily's going to cover. I've been on air for too long, said too many terrible things, reported too many deaths. I need to clear my head, remember what normal feels like, hold on to my humanity before it gets ground away by the relentless march of crisis. I'll be back shortly. Stay tuned, stay safe, and if you have loved ones inside the zone, don't give up hope. People are fighting to survive and fighting to save them. We haven't forgotten anyone. We're doing everything we can. 1:14 p.m. I'm back. Took a walk around the building, felt the sun on my face, reminded myself that there's still a world beyond the studio and the crisis. It helped marginally, enough to keep going for another few hours at least. Emily's been monitoring social media during my break, and there's a groundswell of public opinion demanding more aggressive action. People outside the zone wanting the military to do more, to go in and rescue survivors or eliminate infected or just do something besides maintain a perimeter and watch. The frustration is understandable, but the demands ignore reality. Going into the zone with conventional military forces would result in massive casualties and accelerate infection spread. Soldiers getting bitten, infected, becoming new vectors for transmission. You'd lose your response force and worsen the crisis simultaneously. That's why the containment strategy relies on barriers and remote operations rather than direct engagement. But people don't want to hear about practical limitations when there are children trapped inside a quarantine zone. They want heroes charging in to save the day. And when that doesn't happen, they blame leaders for cowardice or incompetence. Sometimes the right decision is the unpopular one, and leaders have to accept that burden. 2:03. There's been a significant development. The CDC has fast-tracked approval for emergency use of the experimental treatment. They're manufacturing initial doses now and expect to have limited quantities available within 24 hours. It won't be enough to treat everyone exposed, but it's a start. The treatment protocol requires administration within 60 minutes of exposure. That means having doses pre-positioned at high-risk locations, having trained personnel ready to administer them, having systems in place to identify exposure events quickly. It's logistically complex, but potentially life-saving. First priority for treatment will be military and emergency personnel, people who are maintaining the perimeter and conducting operations in or near the zone. They're at highest risk, and if they fall to infection, the entire response structure could collapse. Next priority will be medical workers and essential infrastructure personnel. Then, if supplies allow, treatment can extend to civilian population. It's triage again, choosing who gets potentially life-saving resources based on their value to collective survival, rather than individual need or merit. It feels wrong, but it's necessary. You save the people who can save others, then you expand outward as resources allow. The alternative is distributing resources equally and losing critical personnel along with everyone else. 2:48. I'm looking at updated maps of the zone. The infected controlled areas are expanding. The survivor controlled areas are shrinking. It's a visual representation of our losing battle, territory marked in red, spreading like blood across the map. In another day or two, there might not be any green left. Just red and gray, infected and empty. Some survivor groups are abandoning their positions voluntarily, trying to move to more defensible locations or join with other groups for better odds. These movements are dangerous, crossing open ground with infected nearby, but staying put isn't viable either when defenses are failing and supplies are exhausted. The survivor network Emily mentioned earlier is coordinating some of these movements, sharing information about safe routes and providing covering fire where possible. It's grassroots military tactics, ordinary people becoming guerrilla fighters out of necessity. They're learning fast, adapting to threats, doing what humans do best, which is solve problems even when the problems seem insurmountable. 326. Emily just got word that her sister is one of the survivors extracted from that apartment building this morning. I didn't know Emily had family in the zone. She never mentioned it, kept that private while helping everyone else manage their fear and grief. But her sister was one of the 29 who made it out. I asked Emily why she didn't say anything, why she didn't take time to deal with her own crisis. She said someone had to keep working, keep the information flowing, and her personal situation didn't change that responsibility. Now that her sister's safe, now that she knows the outcome, she can process it. But not before, because before there was still work to do. That's dedication beyond anything I've seen before. Continuing to function professionally while your own family is in mortal danger, not letting personal fear compromise your ability to help others. Emily's a better person than I am. I don't know if I could do the same. 407. The first artillery strike is being prepared. The target is a concentration of infected in an industrial area where there are no known survivors. Over 300 infected in a relatively confined space. Eliminated with a single strike would significantly reduce the total infected population. The authorization came from the highest levels after hours of debate. Once this happens, once we start using military weapons on our own territory, a line is crossed that can never be uncrossed. But the alternative is allowing those 300 infected to continue spreading, to attack survivor groups, to potentially breach the perimeter if they gather enough mass and momentum. The strike is scheduled for 1700 hours, just before sunset. Drone surveillance will confirm the target zone is clear of survivors. Artillery will fire and will assess results. If it's effective, if it works without unacceptable collateral damage, it might become standard practice for dealing with large infected concentrations. I'm conflicted about this. Violence as solution to violence, destruction to stop destruction. But maybe that's the world we live in now, where the gentler options have failed and harsh measures are all that remain. We tried containment, tried barriers, tried hoping the infection would burn out on its own. None of it worked fast enough, so now we escalate. 4:53. 10 minutes until the artillery strike. The area has been confirmed clear of survivors through multiple surveillance passes. The infected are clustered in and around a warehouse complex, probably drawn there by something we can't identify from aerial observation. They're just milling around, that characteristic aimless movement punctuated by occasional aggressive interaction. The artillery battery is in position outside the zone. They're using precision munitions, GPS-guided shells, that should strike within meters of designated coordinates. The goal is total destruction of the target area with minimal spread to adjacent structures. In an urban environment that's challenging, but the alternative is even more challenging. Emily and I are watching on monitors, live feed from multiple drones covering different angles. This is going to be brutal to witness, but we need to see it, need to understand what we're doing and what it costs. You don't get to make decisions like this and then look away from the consequences. 5 p.m. exactly. The shells are inbound. 3 seconds. 2. 1. Impact. The warehouse complex erupts in flame and concussion. Multiple explosions of shells hit in rapid succession, overlapping blast waves, the entire structure collapsing in on itself. Infected are thrown by the blast, torn apart by shrapnel, crushed under falling debris. The area where hundreds of infected stood seconds ago is now a crater surrounded by burning rubble. It worked. Tactically, strategically, it achieved the objective. 300 infected eliminated in seconds, but watching it happen, seeing bodies destroyed even if those bodies were already lost to infection, it's sickening. We just killed 300 people. They weren't people anymore in any meaningful sense, but they were alive and now they're not, and we did that deliberately. The silence in the studio is heavy. Emily and I both watching the aftermath, the fires burning, smoke rising, nothing moving in the impact zone except flames. This is what we've become. A civilization that artillery strikes its own cities because the alternative is worse. How did we get here? 5:37. The strike is being evaluated as successful. No collateral damage to adjacent buildings beyond minor blast effects. No survivors appear to have been caught in the impact zone. Infected population in the zone reduced by approximately 6% in a single action. From a tactical perspective, it's a win. More strikes are being planned for tomorrow, targeting other large concentrations of infected in areas where survivors aren't present. The military is creating a target list, prioritizing based on infected numbers and proximity to survivor groups. If they can reduce the infected population through systematic strikes, survival odds for people still in the zone improve significantly. The ethical debate will continue for years, whether this was necessary, whether there were alternatives, whether the ends justified the means. But right now, in the moment, with people dying and infection spreading, the people making these decisions are trying to save lives with the tools available to them. Judge them if you want, but understand the constraints they were operating under. 612, darkness approaching again. Third night since the crisis began. Each night worse than the last, more infected, fewer survivors, less hope. I don't know how many more nights we can endure before something breaks completely, before the system fails and chaos becomes permanent. Emily's checking in with the survivor network, getting reports on their status and needs. Most groups are stable for now, holding positions, rationing supplies, waiting for rescue or relief that might never come. Some groups have gone silent either because they chose to preserve battery power or because they're no longer able to communicate. The silence is what haunts you. Not knowing if silence means safety or death, if that group you were talking to yesterday is still alive today, or if they fell to infection or violence or despair. Every silent radio is a potential tragedy you can't confirm or prevent. 651. Full dark now. I can see the zone from the studio window, or at least I can see where it is. Patches of darkness where power is out, occasional fires burning, the perimeter marked by floodlights and security lighting. It looks like a wound in the city, an infected area that the healthy tissue is trying to wall off. The infected are more active at night. Thermal imaging shows increased movement, more aggressive behavior, hunting patterns becoming more pronounced. Whatever drives them seems to intensify after sunset. Maybe it's environmental, maybe it's something about the infection itself, but nights are when they're most dangerous. Survivor groups are going into defensive mode, minimizing noise and light, maximizing security. Some are operating on shifts, half sleeping while half keeps watch, maintaining continuous vigilance. Others don't have enough people for shifts and are just staying awake as long as possible, surviving on adrenaline and fear. 729, there's been an incident at one of the checkpoints. Not an attack, but a confrontation between civilians and military personnel. A group of people demanding to be allowed into the zone to search for family members, military refusing entry. Tensions escalating into shouting and shoving. The military held the line, but it's getting harder to justify the perimeter to people whose loved ones are trapped inside. They want to take the risk, want to try to rescue their families, and being told no by armed soldiers feels like abandonment. But letting them in means more potential infections, more people at risk, more complications for an already impossible situation. Some people are going to try to enter the zone regardless of orders or consequences. Fence jumping, sneaking through gaps in coverage, bribing guards, whatever it takes. Once they're inside, they become part of the problem, more civilians to track and protect and eventually extract. But you can't stop love or desperation with barriers and rules. People will risk everything for family. 803. I'm reading reports from the medical facilities where evacuees are being processed. Everyone extracted from the zone is being tested for infection, monitored for symptoms, isolated until they're cleared. It's causing overcrowding in the medical system, but it's necessary to prevent infected individuals from being released into the general population. The testing protocols are improving as we learn more about the infection. Initially, it was just temperature checks and visual assessment. Now they're using blood tests that can detect the compound in someone's system before symptoms appear. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing, and it means fewer infected individuals slipping through screening. Of the 247 people extracted from the zone so far, 11 tested positive for infection despite appearing asymptomatic. They were isolated immediately and are being monitored. Some might be candidates for the experimental treatment once it's available. Others might progress too quickly for treatment to help. Each positive test is a person whose life is probably over, who's going to transform into something that has to be contained or destroyed. But each detection is also a prevented outbreak, an infected individual caught before they could spread the infection to new locations. The math is cold but accurate. 847. Emily's sister is being interviewed by federal investigators. Standard procedure for anyone extracted from the zone. gathering intelligence about conditions inside, infected behavior patterns, survivor group capability. They're building a comprehensive picture of the situation to inform response strategies. Emily's worried about her sister's psychological state. She watched people die, was nearly killed herself, spent days hiding from infected in a building that was slowly being overrun. That's not something you just bounce back from. PTSD is virtually guaranteed, possibly complicated by survivor's guilt and adjustment disorder. The support systems for psychological trauma are overwhelmed. Too many people affected, not enough therapists or counselors, too much acute crisis and not enough long-term care resources. People are going to fall through the cracks, going to suffer quietly because the system can't accommodate everyone who needs help. It's another layer of tragedy on top of the immediate crisis. 9:36. The death toll estimates keep climbing. Command Center is now saying possibly 8,000 dead inside the zone. Combination of people killed by infected, people who died from lack of medical care or supplies, people who took their own lives rather than face infection. 8,000 lives lost in 3 days. That's a catastrophic casualty rate by any measure. The number of infected is harder to pin down. Somewhere between 6 and 10,000 based on surveillance and mathematical modeling. Some areas are too dense with infected to get accurate counts. The artillery strike eliminated 300, but there are thousands more and they're continuing to spread. At some point, the math suggests everyone still alive in the zone will be infected unless they're extracted or somehow manage to isolate themselves completely. We're watching demographic collapse in real time, a population being consumed by a plague we created and can't stop. 10:21. I've been on air for most of 72 hours now. My voice is giving out, throat raw from talking, thoughts scattered from exhaustion, but I keep going because this is my post and I hold it until I'm relieved or I collapse. Military thinking applied to civilian broadcasting, but it feels appropriate. Emily convinced me to let her take over for an hour while I rest. I'm not sleeping, just lying down in the break room, eyes closed, trying to find some reservoir of energy I can draw on to keep functioning. The coffee stopped working, the adrenaline's wearing thin. What's left is just determination and the knowledge that people need this broadcast. I can hear Emily's voice through the walls, calm and professional, delivering updates I helped prepare. She's good at this. If something happens to me, if I can't continue, she'll keep the broadcast going. That's comforting somehow, knowing that the work will continue regardless of individual limitations. 11:08. I'm back. Emily's grateful for the break even though she didn't admit to needing it. We're both running on pride and stubbornness at this point, refusing to acknowledge our limits because acknowledging them means confronting how close we are to breaking. The command center is planning a major evacuation operation for tomorrow. Multiple helicopters, coordinated rescue of several survivor groups simultaneously, trying to get as many people out as possible before conditions deteriorate further. It's risky and resource-intensive, but potentially the last chance for extraction before the zone becomes completely overrun. Survivor groups are being contacted and given instructions, designated pickup points, timing windows, procedures for identifying themselves to rescue crews. Everyone's being warned that this might be the only opportunity for extraction, that if they don't make the window, they'll be staying in the zone indefinitely. Some groups are in positions where they can't reach pickup points safely, too far away, too many infected between them and extraction zones, not enough mobile survivors to make the journey. They're being told to shelter in place and wait for alternative rescue methods, but everyone knows that might mean waiting forever. 11:53. 7 minutes to midnight, 3 days into the crisis, the anniversary of when this nightmare began, when smugglers broke vials of bioengineered compound and started a cascade that's consumed thousands of lives and transformed a city into a war zone. I wonder what those smugglers would think if they could see what their criminal negligence created. If they're still alive to think, which is doubtful. They were probably among the first infected, exposed to the highest concentration of the compound, transformed before they understood what was happening. There's no satisfaction in that thought. Punishment doesn't undo harm. Justice doesn't resurrect the dead. All we have is the ongoing work of managing the crisis and trying to prevent it from getting worse. No revenge, no closure, just survival and mitigation. Midnight. 72 hours since the first reports came through, 3 days that changed everything, that revealed how fragile our civilization is, how quickly order can collapse when the right pressure is applied. We thought we were secure, thought our systems and institutions could handle anything. We were wrong. Emily's looking at projections for the next few days. If current trends continue, the zone will be entirely overrun by infected within 96 hours. Every survivor group will be eliminated or forced into such precarious positions that survival becomes unlikely. The zone will effectively become a necropolis, A city of the dead or dying, patrolled by infected who no longer have living humans to hunt. What happens then? Do we maintain the quarantine indefinitely, keeping the infected contained until they eventually die from cellular breakdown or lack of sustenance? Do we go in with overwhelming force and eliminate every infected individual, cleansing the zone through systematic extermination? Do we abandon the zone entirely, write it off as lost territory? There are no good answers. Every path forward involves more death, more destruction, more moral compromises. We're not choosing between good options and bad options. We're choosing between terrible options and catastrophic options, trying to find the least awful way forward. 12:41 a.m. I'm watching drone footage of infected moving through the streets. Their movement patterns have become more organized over the last day. They're traveling in groups, moving with apparent purpose rather than aimlessly wandering. Some groups are 20 or 30 individuals strong, small armies of infected coordinating their movement. This suggests the infection is evolving, developing behaviors that make it more effective at spreading and surviving. The early infected were random and scattered. The current infected show pack behavior and basic tactics. If this trend continues, if they develop more sophisticated strategies, containment becomes exponentially more difficult. The enhanced mutations are also becoming more common. The latest estimates put them at 15% of the infected population, up from 10% yesterday. The acceleration is concerning. In another few days, enhanced infected could outnumber standard infected, fundamentally changing the threat profile we're dealing with. Enhanced infected are stronger, faster, more aggressive. They can break through barriers that stop standard infected, can hunt more effectively, can survive more damage before being neutralized. A zone filled primarily with enhanced infected would be nearly impossible to operate in, even for trained military personnel. 1:26. The supply drops scheduled for tonight have been delayed due to weather. Storms moving through the area, high winds and lightning, conditions that make helicopter operations too dangerous. The supplies will be dropped tomorrow when weather clears, but that means survivor groups expecting resupply tonight won't get it. Some groups were counting on those supplies. They rationed everything, calculated down to the last meal, assuming resupply would arrive on schedule. Now they're facing another day without food or with dangerously low reserves. Hunger makes people desperate. Desperation makes them take risks. Risks lead to exposure and infection. It's not anyone's fault that weather doesn't cooperate with emergency operations, but it's another example of how everything that can go wrong in a crisis tends to go wrong simultaneously. Murphy's Law applied to disaster response. 2:03. Emily's monitoring the survivor network and there's chatter about a breakout attempt. One of the larger survivor groups, maybe 50 people, is planning to try to fight their way to the perimeter and force their way through. They don't believe rescue is coming and they're not willing to wait and die. The command center is aware of the planning and has reinforced the section of perimeter they're likely to target. Orders are to stop any breach attempt using whatever force is necessary. That means potentially shooting people who are just trying to escape, but allowing a breach could mean infected escaping along with survivors. It's another impossible situation. The survivors planning this breakout are desperate and probably won't be dissuaded by warnings or threats. The military can't let them through without compromising the perimeter. When they clash, people are going to die, and some of those people are going to be uninfected civilians who just wanted to live. I wish I could tell that survivor group to stand down, to trust that rescue will come, but I can't make promises I can't keep. Maybe rescue won't come. Maybe they're right to try to save themselves even if the attempt is likely to fail. Who am I to tell desperate people not to fight for their lives? 2:48. The breakout attempt has begun. The survivor group is moving toward the perimeter armed with improvised weapons and whatever firearms they've scavenged, determined to get through or die trying. The military is broadcasting warnings telling them to turn back, that lethal force is authorized. The survivors aren't stopping, they're advancing in a formation, using cars as mobile cover, suppressing fire to keep military heads down. Some of them have military training or are learning tactics in real time. They're making the military work for every meter of ground, but the military has superior firepower and position. As the survivors get close to the barriers, precision fire is picking them off, suppressing their advance, forcing them to take cover, pinning them down. The survivors are trying to push through, but they can't close the distance without taking casualties they can't afford. 3:21. The breakout failed. 17 survivors killed, another 8 wounded and captured. The rest scattered back into the zone, their attempt crushed by superior force. The military held the perimeter, but at the cost of killing their own citizens, people who were probably uninfected and just trying to escape. The bodies of the dead are being examined to confirm infection status. If they were uninfected, if they were healthy people killed for trying to survive, that's a tragedy and a crime and a necessity all at once. The commanders who gave those orders are going to carry that weight forever. The wounded who were captured are being tested and treated. If they're uninfected, they might be released or allowed to stay in protected custody. If they're infected, they'll be isolated with the other infected individuals we've detained for study. Either way, their breakout attempt is over. Emily's in tears again. Watching desperate people cut down trying to escape is more than anyone should have to witness. But we're witnesses. That's our role, bearing testimony to events so they can be recorded and remembered and learned from. Witnesses don't get to look away. 4:07, dawn's approaching. Day 4 of the crisis beginning. The sun doesn't care about human suffering, just keeps rising and setting on schedule, marking time and different to whether we're using that time to save lives or watch them end. I'm exhausted beyond description. Every part of me hurts, physically and emotionally. But the broadcast continues. Emily and I taking turns at the microphone, spelling each other when one of us starts to break down, maintaining the flow of information to people who need it. How long can we keep this up? How many more days of crisis before we collapse from accumulated strain? I don't know. I guess we'll find out when we get there. Until then, we keep going. 5:33. The sun's up, full daylight illuminating the zone. The helicopter extraction operation is being prepared. Flight crews running pre-flight checks. Survivor groups moving to designated pickup points. Military units positioning to provide covering fire during extractions. This is the big one, the operation that could save hundreds of lives if it succeeds or cost aircraft and crew if it fails. Everything's being coordinated down to the second, multiple aircraft operating in sequence, landing zones secured by survivor groups and covered by military snipers from outside the zone. The timeline calls for 6 separate extractions at different locations across the zone. Each helicopter will land, load as many survivors as it can safely carry, and lift off before infected can overrun the position. Total operation time estimated at 90 minutes from first landing to last liftoff. I'm watching the preparations on monitors, seeing the scale of effort being dedicated to saving people who were written off just days ago as unreachable. It's hope manifesting as helicopters and fuel and brave pilots willing to fly into hell for strangers. Maybe we're not completely lost after all. 6:14 a.m. The operation is beginning. First helicopter inbound to a pickup point in the eastern sector. Survivors are in position, about 40 people gathered in a parking area they've cleared and defended. Infected in the area, but the survivor group has set up firing positions to keep them back. The helicopter's descending. I can hear the rotor wash through the radio transmission, the pilot calling out altitude and approach angle. The survivors are waving, signaling, marking their position. The helicopter touches down, side doors sliding open, people rushing toward it. Loading is chaotic but organized. Children and injured first, then elderly, then whoever can fit. The survivor group has discipline, not panicking, following the protocol they were briefed on. Infected are approaching from multiple directions, drawn by the noise, but the defensive positions are holding them back with sustained fire. 32 people loaded. The helicopter's at capacity, rotor spinning up to full power, lifting off. The remaining survivors are watching it climb away, knowing they didn't make this extraction but hoping there will be another chance. The helicopter banks away, heading toward the perimeter and safety. First extraction successful. 5 more to go. 6:41. Second helicopter is inbound to a location in the northern sector. This group is smaller, maybe 20 survivors, but their situation is more precarious. They're on top of a commercial building surrounded by infected, no ground level defense, relying on the roof being inaccessible. The problem is the roof access door isn't secure. Infected have been trying to break through for hours and the door is failing. The survivors are holding it with furniture and their own body weight, but it won't last much longer. The helicopter needs to get them out now or they're lost. The pilot is pushing hard, maximizing speed despite the risk. Every second counts. The helicopter arrives, hovers over the roof. There's no flat space to land, so they're doing a hover extraction again, lowering the basket while the pilot fights the controls to maintain stable position. The roof access door bursts open, infected pour through, maybe 10 or 15 of them immediately rushing toward the survivors. The survivors are fighting hand to hand, trying to hold them off while people load into the basket. It's chaos. Screaming and gunfire and the roar of helicopter rotors. Emily's monitoring the radio, translating the chatter for me. People are being pulled up in the basket, 2 at a time, agonizingly slow. The pilot wants to leave, the situation is deteriorating, but the crew chief is begging for more time. Just a few more people, just another minute. An infected grabs one of the survivors, pulls them down, Others rush to help, but the infected is strong, enhanced mutation, tearing into its victim. Blood everywhere, screams cut short. The other survivors have to abandon their friend, can't save them, can only keep fighting and hope the basket comes back down. 17 survivors extracted before the situation became untenable. 3 didn't make it, pulled down by infected or killed in the fighting. The helicopter had to pull away, leaving bodies on the roof, leaving infected celebrating their kill if infected can celebrate. I don't know what to call what they do when they successfully attack prey. 7:23. Third extraction is underway. This one's going better. A survivor group that fortified a school building and has good defensive positions. 56 people in this group, one of the largest remaining cohesive units inside the zone. They've organized themselves like a military unit with command structure and assigned roles. When the helicopter lands, they execute the loading procedure with efficiency that would make professional soldiers proud. No panic, no confusion, just rapid boarding while security teams maintain perimeter defense. This group has been fighting infected for 3 days and they've gotten good at it. Their shooting is accurate, their tactics are sound, they work together like a unit that's trained for months rather than days. Crisis brings out capabilities people didn't know they had. All 56 people extracted successfully with minimal contact with infected. The helicopter lifts off with its second load, having made 2 trips to get everyone. The school building is being abandoned. 3 days of defenses and survival now. Just an empty structure that infected will wander through finding nothing. 8:06. Fourth extraction is encountering problems. The helicopter can't land at the designated pickup point because infected have overrun it. The survivor group is pinned down inside a building, unable to reach the extraction zone safely. The pilot is searching for alternative landing areas nearby, somewhere close enough that the survivors can reach but clear enough for the helicopter to operate. It's difficult in an urban environment with infected scattered throughout the area and limited open space. They've found a spot, a park area, 2 blocks from the survivors' location. The pilot is landing there, and the survivors are going to have to fight their way through 2 blocks of infected controlled streets to reach extraction. It's risky, but it's the only option. The survivors are moving. 15 people, armed and moving in tight formation, suppressing fire, keeping infected at bay. They're taking fire from the military perimeter too, snipers providing overwatch, taking down infected that get too close to the survivor group. 1 block cleared. Halfway there, an infected rushes from a side alley, tackles one of the survivors. The others stop to help, shoot the infected off their companion, keep moving. The tackled survivor is injured but mobile, being helped along by 2 others. They're at the park. The helicopter is waiting, rotors at full power, ready for immediate liftoff. The survivors are running now, final sprint to safety. Infected are pursuing, but the military snipers are cutting them down, providing cover fire while the survivors board. All 15 aboard. The helicopter is lifting off. They made it 2 blocks through infected controlled territory and they all survived. Either they're incredibly skilled or incredibly lucky, probably both. 8:57. Fifth extraction is the most dangerous yet. The survivor group is in a hospital barricaded on an upper floor, surrounded by hundreds of infected throughout the building. The hospital's been a focal point for infected because there were so many people there when the crisis started, patients and staff who couldn't evacuate. The extraction plan involves the helicopter landing on the hospital roof while military helicopters provide suppressing fire to keep infected away from the roof access. It's a coordinated operation requiring multiple aircraft and precise timing. Both helicopters are inbound. The military gunship is engaging infected on the lower floors visible through windows, trying to draw them away from the stairwells the survivors need to use to reach the roof. The extraction helicopter is approaching the roof, preparing to land. The survivors are moving up from the 6th floor where they've been sheltering. 23 people, including medical staff who stayed behind to care for patients they couldn't evacuate. Some of those patients are with them, injured or sick people being carried or supported by staff. They're encountering infected on the stairs. The stairwell is narrow, defensible, but infected are coming from above and below. The survivors are trapped in a vertical fight, shooting up and down the stairwell, trying to clear a path to the roof. The military helicopter is firing into the building, rockets and cannon fire, trying to eliminate infected and clear the survivors' path. It's brutal, destructive. The building is taking massive damage, but it's creating the space the survivors need to advance. They've reached the roof. The extraction helicopter is landing, survivors running across the rooftop, loading as fast as possible. Infected are bursting through the roof access door. The military helicopter is engaging them, but there are too many. They're overwhelming the kill zone. The pilot is screaming into the radio that they need to leave now. The crew chief is still loading people, shouting that there are still survivors on the roof. The pilot is making the call they have to go. Infected are about to reach the helicopter. 19 survivors aboard, 4 still on the roof when the helicopter lifts off. Those 4 are fighting infected hand to hand, no time to reload, no space to maneuver. The military helicopter is engaging but can't fire without hitting the survivors. One of the 4 goes down, pulled into a mass of infected. The other 3 are back to back, swinging weapons, trying to survive just a few more seconds. But there are dozens of infected and only 3 of them, and the math doesn't work. The military helicopter pilot makes a decision. He's going in, against orders, against protocol, breaking formation to attempt an unauthorized rescue. The gunship swings around, comes in low over the roof, side gunners firing point blank into the infected mass. The 3 survivors see the opportunity, break toward the helicopter. 2 make it, grab onto the landing skids, hang on as the helicopter lifts away. The 3rd is grabbed by infected, pulled back, lost. The helicopter climbs with 2 people hanging from its landing gear, crew chiefs reaching down to pull them into the cabin. 21 survivors extracted, 2 in the most dramatic fashion I've ever witnessed. The military pilot who broke formation to rescue them is going to face disciplinary action for unauthorized maneuver, but he saved 2 lives, and that has to count for something. 9:46. Final extraction of the operation. The helicopter is approaching a survivor group in the western sector, last pickup point on the mission list. This group has been relatively stable. Good defenses, adequate supplies, but they've requested extraction because they're running out of ammunition and they know they can't hold indefinitely. The landing zone is a shopping center parking lot. Open space that the survivors have secured and cleared. 31 people in this group, ready to evacuate, gathered and waiting when the helicopter approaches. Something's wrong. Emily's seeing it on the drone feed before the pilot does. There are infected hiding inside the shopping center, more than the survivors realized, maybe 100 or more. They've been waiting, somehow patient or tactical enough to stay hidden until the helicopter arrived. The infected are rushing out, pouring from multiple entrances, overwhelming the survivors' defensive positions through sheer numbers. The survivors are falling back toward the helicopter, but there are too many infected coming too fast. The pilot sees it, starts to wave off, pulling altitude to abort the landing, but the survivors are running toward where the helicopter was going to land. They're committed to extraction. If the helicopter leaves, they'll be overrun. The pilot makes a split-second decision. He's landing anyway. Hot LZ, infected, converging, landing in the middle of a deteriorating situation because those people below him have no other chance. The helicopter touches down. Survivors are sprinting toward it. Infected are right behind them. Meters back and closing. The first survivors reach the helicopter, start boarding, but infected are so close they're grabbing at people trying to climb aboard. The door gunners are firing point-blank range, trying to create space for boarding. Infected are getting hit and going down, but more keep coming. One infected gets a hand on a survivor being pulled into the cabin. The crew chief has to physically kick it away. Loading is chaotic, people being thrown into the cabin, no time for orderly boarding. The pilot is watching infected reach the helicopter, starting to climb the landing gear. He's making the call, they're leaving. Rotors already spinning up to departure power. Not everyone made it aboard. The last few survivors are still running toward the helicopter when it lifts off, unable to wait any longer without risking the aircraft. Those survivors stop, watch the helicopter climb away, realize they've been left behind. 24 survivors extracted, 7 left behind, including the ones who were closest to making it. They're standing in the parking lot, surrounded by infected, watching their rescue fly away. Some are fighting, trying to survive just a little longer. Others have stopped fighting, accepting what's about to happen. The helicopter crew is watching too, forced to witness the consequences of their decision to leave. The pilot made the right tactical call, stayed long enough to save 24 people left before the aircraft was compromised. But 7 people are dying right now because he couldn't stay 10 more seconds. Emily's not translating the radio chatter anymore. She's just staring at the monitor, watching infected overrun the survivors left behind. I want to tell her to look away, but she won't. She's bearing witness, same as me, refusing to grant ourselves the mercy of ignorance. The parking lot is clear now, except for bodies and infected feeding on them. The helicopter is crossing the perimeter, bringing 24 survivors to safety. The extraction operation is complete. 10:33. The final tally from the extraction operation: 168 survivors rescued from 6 different locations, 14 killed during extraction attempts or left behind. 6 extraction missions completed, though not all successfully. 2 helicopters damaged by small arms fire from infected controlled areas. one severely enough that it's grounded pending repairs. The pilot who broke formation to rescue those two from the hospital roof is being recommended for a commendation rather than discipline. His unauthorized maneuver saved lives and demonstrated the kind of initiative and courage that's necessary in crisis response. Sometimes you have to break rules to do the right thing. The survivors are being processed through decontamination and medical screening. Most are physically intact, though exhausted and traumatized. Several have injuries requiring treatment. All will need psychological support to deal with what they've experienced. 168 people who were facing almost certain death are now safe. That's the victory. The 14 who didn't make it, the 7 we watched die in that parking lot, they're the cost. We celebrate the victory while acknowledging the cost, understanding that both are real and both matter. 11:21. I'm reading reports from the medical teams treating the survivors. The stories they're telling are harrowing. Days hiding in darkness, listening to infected outside their barriers, watching friends and family turn into monsters, making impossible choices about who to save and who to abandon. One survivor, a woman named Jocelyn, described watching her husband get bitten while defending their apartment. She locked him in the bathroom as he started to change, listened to him deteriorate from the person she loved into something that wanted to kill her. He begged her to let him out, then he screamed, then he stopped making human sounds entirely. She stayed in that apartment with her infected husband locked in the bathroom for 2 days before she was evacuated. Another survivor, a man named Rashid, was part of the group at the grocery store. He talked about the defense rotations, the rationing systems they developed, the community that emerged from desperate people working together. He said it was the most meaningful experience of his life, even though it was the most terrifying. Finding purpose and connection in crisis, discovering capabilities he didn't know he possessed. These stories need to be recorded and preserved. They're part of the historical record, testimony to what happened here and how people responded. Future generations need to understand both the horror and the heroism, the failures and the resilience. Noon, 78 hours into the crisis. The infection is spread across 90% of the zone based on drone surveillance. Remaining survivor groups are scattered, isolated, running low on supplies and hope. The extraction operation helped, but it barely made a dent in the total number of people still trapped. Emily's been calculating numbers. Estimated initial population of the zone when quarantine went into effect, 32,000. Current estimated survivors, 4,000. That means 28,000 people dead or infected in just over 3 days. The scale of loss is incomprehensible. Some of those 28,000 might still be recovered if the treatment works. If we can capture infected individuals before they deteriorate too far, administer treatment, reverse or halt the progression. But most are beyond help, too far gone, their humanity consumed by uncontrolled cellular mutation. The zone is becoming a wasteland. Fires have destroyed large sections. Artillery strikes have created craters. Abandoned buildings are collapsing from neglect and damage. Even if we could clear all the infected tomorrow, the physical infrastructure is so damaged that rebuilding would take years. 12:47 p.m., the experimental treatment is ready for field testing. Limited quantities have been produced and are being distributed to military units and medical facilities. The protocol is to administer within 60 minutes of confirmed exposure, 2 injections spaced 30 minutes apart, then monitor for 72 hours. The first test subject is one of the soldiers who was bitten during the checkpoint attack. He was bitten approximately 6 hours ago but hasn't shown symptoms yet, possibly due to natural resistance or lower infection load. He's been informed about the experimental nature of the treatment and has consented to receive it. The injection is being administered now. Medical team standing by to monitor for adverse reactions or complications. The soldier is scared. You can see it in his face, but he's staying composed. He knows he's the first human trial of a treatment that could save thousands of lives if it works. 30 minutes pass with no visible change in his condition, no symptom development, no adverse reactions to the treatment. Second injection administered. Now it's a waiting game, watching and monitoring, hoping the treatment is working at the cellular level, even though we can't see it yet. 1:38. While waiting for results on the treatment trial, I'm monitoring the situation inside the zone. The infected are consolidating, gathering in large groups, concentrations of hundreds in certain areas. It's creating target-rich environments for artillery strikes, but it's also concerning because it suggests coordinated behavior at a higher level than we've seen before. One concentration of infected is particularly large, maybe 800 individuals gathered in and around a sports stadium. Thermal imaging shows them packed densely, almost motionless, like they're waiting for something. It's unprecedented behavior, nothing like the random wandering we've observed previously. The command center is debating whether to strike this concentration with artillery. 800 infected eliminated in one strike would significantly reduce the total infected population. But the gathering behavior is so unusual that they want to study it, understand what it means before destroying the evidence. Drones are being repositioned to get better observation of the stadium. Scientists are reviewing the footage, trying to interpret what they're seeing. The infected aren't fighting each other, aren't attacking the few uninfected individuals who wander too close. They're just gathered, waiting, existing in unusual proximity without conflict. 226. The soldier who received the experimental treatment is showing positive signs. 6 hours post-exposure, he should be symptomatic by now based on average infection timelines. But he's showing no symptoms, no behavioral changes, no physiological markers of infection. The treatment might be working. Blood tests show the compound in his system, but at low concentrations, much lower than would be expected. The treatment appears to be binding with the compound and neutralizing it, preventing it from reaching the levels necessary to trigger full infection. It's early yet, but the preliminary data is encouraging. Additional treatment doses are being prepared for other high-risk individuals, military personnel, medical staff, emergency workers, anyone who might be exposed in the course of their duties. If the treatment proves reliable, it changes the entire risk calculus for operations in or near the zone. The possibility of actually going into the zone with ground forces, extracting survivors, engaging infected directly, it becomes feasible if personnel can be protected through prophylactic treatment. We might be looking at the beginning of the end of this crisis, or at least the beginning of having tools to fight it effectively. 304. The infected gathered at the stadium are moving. All of them simultaneously, like someone flipped a switch. They're leaving the stadium in organized streams, moving through the streets in formation, heading in specific directions with apparent purpose. This is coordinated behavior on a scale we haven't witnessed. 800 infected moving in organized groups suggests communication or shared intelligence or collective consciousness. The implications are disturbing. If infected can organize and coordinate, they're not just a biological threat, they're a strategic threat. The command center is tracking their movement, trying to determine objectives or targets. Some groups are moving toward the perimeter, others toward areas where survivor groups are known to be sheltering. It's like a coordinated offensive, infected deploying for maximum impact. Military units along the perimeter are being reinforced, prepared for potential assault. Survivor groups are being warned through the radio network to expect increased infected activity and to secure their positions. Everyone who can fight is preparing to fight. Everyone who can hide is finding the best hiding place they can. 357. The infected offensive has begun. Multiple simultaneous attacks against survivor positions across the zone, hundreds of infected pressing against defenses that were barely holding even before this escalation. Groups that survived 3 days of sporadic attacks are being overrun in minutes by coordinated assault. The radio network is filled with distress calls, people screaming for help that can't come, final transmissions before communications go silent. Emily's trying to track which groups are falling, which are holding, but it's happening too fast and there are too many calls to process them all. One group, a fortified apartment building in the southern sector, is reporting waves of infected attacking in sequence. The first wave gets cut down, the second wave attacks immediately after, then the third. The defenders are burning through ammunition, replacing fallen defenders as people get injured or killed, trying desperately to maintain the perimeter. They're calling for artillery support, but the command center is denying the request. Too many civilians in the area, too much risk of hitting uninfected people. The defenders are on their own, facing overwhelming numbers with finite resources. The transmission from that building cuts off mid-sentence. Silence. We don't know if they lost power or lost their lives, but we know they're not transmitting anymore. Another group gone, another cluster of human resistance extinguished. 443. The attacks on the perimeter have intensified. Thousands of infected pushing against the barriers, not randomly but in concentrated assaults at specific weak points. The military is holding, but it's taking everything they have. Continuous fire, artillery strikes called in on their own positions to break up infected masses. One section of the perimeter nearly collapsed when infected got through the wire obstacles and reached the concrete barriers. Hand-to-hand fighting, soldiers using bayonets and rifle butts against infected that got too close. The line held, but several soldiers were bitten and are now in quarantine awaiting treatment. The experimental treatment is being administered to all bitten personnel immediately, rather than waiting for symptoms. It's aggressive use of limited supplies, but the alternative is losing soldiers to infection, and that's unacceptable when the perimeter is under assault. Emily just informed me that the infected stadium gathering has been completely emptied. All 800 infected deployed in the offensive. Whatever intelligence or coordination allowed them to gather also allowed them to deploy tactically. We're fighting an enemy that's learning and adapting faster than we can respond. The sun's starting to set again. Fourth night approaching, the worst night yet based on what we're seeing. The infected are coordinating, the defenses are strained, survivors are falling faster than we can track. This could be the night everything breaks completely. I'm exhausted beyond description. Emily's in worse shape, barely keeping her eyes open, running on pure willpower, but we keep broadcasting because that's what we do. That's our contribution to the fight. Information is a weapon and we're wielding it as best we can. The command center has issued a classified alert that Emily's source leaked to us. They're considering evacuation of personnel from the perimeter, falling back to a secondary containment line further out, abandoning the inner zone to the infected. It would mean writing off everyone still inside, condemning them to death or infection, but it might be necessary to preserve the response force. The decision hasn't been made yet. There's fierce argument among leadership about whether to hold or withdraw. Some say holding is suicidal, that they're throwing lives away defending an indefensible position. Others say withdrawal is surrender, that abandoning survivors is morally unacceptable regardless of tactical consideration. I don't know which side is right. Maybe there is no right answer, just choices with different costs and consequences. 6:17 p.m. Full darkness now. The infected attacks are continuing under cover of night. Thermal imaging shows masses of infected pressing against perimeter defenses, testing for weaknesses, probing for gaps. The military is using floodlights and flares to maintain visibility, but darkness gives advantage to attackers who don't fear light. Inside the zone, the surviving groups have gone dark and quiet. No transmissions, no visible activity, everyone hiding and hoping the infected offensive passes them by. It's the only survival strategy available when you can't fight and can't run. One transmission came through briefly, a voice I didn't recognize, saying they were out of ammunition and barricading themselves in a closet. They said if anyone was listening, please remember that they tried. Please tell their family they fought hard. Then silence. We don't even know where they were, can't confirm what happened, just have that final message as evidence they existed and resisted. 7:03. The perimeter is holding but at tremendous cost. Ammunition expenditure is far exceeding projections. Artillery tubes are overheating from sustained fire. Personnel are exhausted from continuous combat. The military can maintain this intensity for maybe another 12 hours before combat effectiveness degrades to critical levels. Resupply convoys are inbound with ammunition and replacement personnel, but they won't arrive until morning. The night has to be survived with current resources, and those resources are depleting rapidly. The infected don't get tired, don't need ammunition, don't experience morale failure. They just keep coming, wave after wave, grinding against defenses until something breaks. It's a war of attrition and they have the numbers advantage. 7:51. Something's changed in the infected attack pattern. They've stopped pressing the perimeter and are pulling back, retreating into the zone interior. Thousands of infected that were attacking minutes ago are now withdrawing in organized fashion, leaving the perimeter defenders confused and relieved and suspicious. Why would they stop? They were making progress, forcing the defenders to expend resources, creating opportunities for breakthrough. The withdrawal doesn't make tactical sense unless they're regrouping for another coordinated assault or unless there's something in the zone that's more important to them than attacking the perimeter. Drones are following the infected retreat, trying to determine where they're going and what they're doing. The images are surreal, masses of infected moving through dark streets in synchronized columns, not random shambling but organized withdrawal. It's military movement executed by things that shouldn't be capable of military thinking. 8:34. The infected have gathered again, this time in a different location. An industrial complex in the center of the zone, thousands of them converging on this single area. Thermal imaging shows between 3,000 and 4,000 infected in and around the complex, the largest gathering we've witnessed. What's in that industrial complex that would draw them? Drone footage shows manufacturing facilities, warehouses, power infrastructure. Nothing obvious that would attract infected attention, but they're gathering there for a reason, and we need to understand what it is. Scientists are analyzing the footage, cross-referencing with data on what companies operated in that complex, what materials might be stored there. One theory is that there's something in the complex that resonates with the infection, some chemical or biological material that the infected are drawn to instinctively. Another theory, more disturbing, is that the infected are building something, using the facilities and materials to construct or create something beyond our current understanding of their capabilities. If infected can build or manufacture, if they've retained that much cognitive function, the threat profile changes fundamentally. 9:22. Emily's source at the command center has sent us classified analysis of the infected gathering. The scientists believe the industrial complex contained research facilities for the same company that created the original bioweapon compound. There might be additional supplies of the compound or related materials stored there. If the infected are drawn to the compound, if they're trying to access it or spread it or consume it, the implications are catastrophic. More compound release could create new infection vectors, could mutate the existing infected into enhanced forms, could spread beyond the zone if the infected somehow transport it. The decision is being made to destroy the industrial complex completely, airstrike, heavy ordnance, total destruction of the facility and everything in it. It means destroying whatever research materials might be there, might help us understand or treat the infection, but the risk of leaving it accessible to infected is too great. The strike is being authorized at the highest levels. Military aircraft are being scrambled, munitions are being loaded, target coordinates are being programmed. Execution is scheduled for 2200 hours, less than 30 minutes from now. 9:53. 7 minutes until the airstrike. The infected are still gathered at the industrial complex, thousands of them packed into a relatively small area. It's the perfect target, maximum enemy concentration in a defined space. One strike could eliminate a third or more of the total infected population. I'm watching the countdown on the command center feed that Emily is displaying. Military aircraft are inbound, pilots have tone on target, weapons are armed and ready. This is the most significant offensive action taken against the infected so far, potentially the turning point of the entire crisis. 60 seconds. The aircraft are making their final approach, coming in fast and low, minimizing time in hostile airspace. The infected below don't react, don't scatter, just remain in their gathering as death approaches from above. 30 seconds. Weapons release. Multiple precision-guided munitions falling toward the target, invisible in the darkness except on infrared where they show as falling heat signatures. Impact. The industrial complex erupts in massive explosions, multiple detonations overlapping, creating a firestorm that engulfs everything in a 3-block radius. The thermal bloom is so intense it blinds the infrared cameras for several seconds. When they recover, the complex is gone, replaced by a crater and burning debris. Thousands of infected eliminated instantly. The largest single casualty event of the crisis, achieved in seconds through overwhelming force. It's brutal and effective and somehow sad, destroying what used to be people even though they're no longer people in any meaningful sense. 10:27. The aftermath of the airstrike is being assessed. Conservative estimates put infected casualties at 3,000. That's nearly half the total infected population eliminated in one strike. The remaining infected are scattered throughout the zone, no longer gathered in large concentration. The strike also destroyed whatever was in that industrial complex, whether it was additional compound or research materials or something else. We'll never know what drew the infected there, what they were trying to access or achieve. The truth is buried under rubble and ash. Survivor groups inside the zone are reporting that infected activity has dropped significantly. The coordinated attacks have stopped, the organized movement has ceased, infected are reverting to their previous random wandering behavior. It's as if destroying that complex broke whatever was coordinating them. Could there have been a central infected individual, something that was controlling or directing the others? Could the compound in that facility have been broadcasting some signal that infected were responding to? We're speculating without data, but something changed when that complex was destroyed. 11:14. The command center has made the decision to hold the current perimeter rather than falling back. The airstrike's success and the subsequent reduction in infected activity has bought them time and space to resupply and reinforce. The evacuation option is off the table for now. This is good news for the survivors still in the zone. It means the military isn't abandoning them, isn't writing them off. But it also means the survivors have to continue holding out, continue surviving in impossible conditions because rescue isn't coming immediately. How much longer can they last? We've extracted fewer than 200 people from an initial population of thousands. Even with the infected population reduced by the airstrike, the survivors are still outnumbered and undersupplied. Time is not on their side. 11:56. 4 minutes until midnight, 4 days since the crisis began. 96 hours of continuous emergency, collapse, crisis, death. It feels like forever, and it feels like just yesterday simultaneously. Time has become meaningless when measured against suffering. Emily's asleep at her desk, finally succumbed to exhaustion. I let her sleep, she's earned it. I'm alone in the studio now, just me and the microphone, and the city outside. Somewhere out there, people are hiding from infected. Somewhere else infected are wandering through ruins, and here I am bearing witness, recording it all for whoever comes after. Midnight. 96 hours, 4 full days. The city has changed fundamentally in that time. We had order, civilization, normalcy. Now we have quarantine zones and infected populations and military strikes on our own territory. The transformation is complete and irreversible. Can we come back from this? Can the zone be reclaimed, cleaned, rebuilt? Can the infected be eliminated or cured? Can society return to something resembling normal? I don't know. The crisis isn't over. The battle isn't won. We're just surviving one day at a time. 12:42 a.m. I'm reading reports from the treatment trials. The soldier who received the first dose 6 hours post-exposure is still showing no symptoms 12 hours later. Blood tests confirm the compound levels in his system are negligible, effectively neutralized by the treatment. It's looking increasingly likely that the treatment works. Additional personnel who were exposed and treated are showing similar results. Sample size is still small, but the trend is encouraging. We might actually have a functional treatment that prevents infection if administered quickly enough. The production is being ramped up. Facilities that normally manufacture vaccines or medicines being retooled to produce this new treatment. Within 48 hours, they expect to have enough doses to protect all military and emergency personnel. Within a week, enough to begin treating civilian population. It's hope, real tangible hope, the first we've had since this began. Not a cure for existing infected, but prevention for future exposure. It means we can start thinking about offensive operations, about going into the zone and systematically clearing it without condemning personnel to infection. 133. There's activity at the perimeter. Infected individuals approaching but not attacking, just standing at the barriers looking out. Their behavior is different from the earlier assault, no aggression, almost like they're observing or waiting for something. Military personnel are watching them, weapons ready but holding fire in the absence of hostile action. It's a standoff. Infected and soldiers facing each other across barriers of wire and concrete, neither side moving. The infected should be attacking, should be showing that characteristic aggression, but they're not. One infected individual is standing directly in front of a floodlight, fully illuminated, easily targeted. It's a female or was before infection, wearing the remains of business attire, just standing and staring at the soldiers. Not making sounds, not trying to breach, just standing. A soldier calls out to her, asks if she can understand him. The infected doesn't respond verbally, but tilts her head, a gesture that seems almost human, almost like she's considering the question. Then she turns and walks away, back into the darkness of the zone, leaving the soldiers confused and disturbed by the interaction. 219. More reports of unusual infected behavior. Infected individuals showing restraint, avoiding confrontation with armed survivors, even appearing to recognize former acquaintances. One survivor reported that an infected person who had been their neighbor approached their defensive position, stopped outside effective weapon range, and just stood watching for several minutes before wandering away. Is the infection changing again? Are infected individuals regaining some measure of cognitive function or emotional capacity? The timeline is too fast for natural evolution, but the compound is synthetic, designed to affect cellular structures in specific ways. Maybe it's reaching a new equilibrium, stabilizing into something different from the initial infection profile. The scientists are fascinated and terrified by these reports. Fascinated because it suggests the infection might be self-limiting or might produce survivable outcomes in some cases. Terrified because infected individuals with retained intelligence are far more dangerous than mindless aggressive hosts. 306. I need to share something personal again. My sister, the one living outside the quarantine zone, called. She wanted to hear my voice, needed reassurance that I'm okay, that this crisis hasn't consumed me entirely. We talked for 10 minutes, just normal sibling conversation, like we were catching up over coffee instead of talking across a city in crisis. She told me she's proud of me, of the work I'm doing, staying on air and keeping people informed. Said she's been listening to the broadcast continuously, finding comfort in the familiar voice explaining the incomprehensible. It meant more than she knows, that acknowledgement, that connection to normal life. I told her I loved her, told her to stay safe, told her that if anything happens, she should get out of the city without hesitation. She promised she would, but we both know promises made in crisis are easier to make than keep. If the situation deteriorates, if the infection spreads beyond the zone, I don't know what she'll do or if I'll ever see her again. That possibility weighs on me. Everyone working this crisis has loved ones who could be affected, who are at risk, who might not survive what's coming. We're trying to save strangers while terrified for family. It's the burden of responsibility in disaster. 403. Dawn approaching, fifth day beginning. The city's starting to wake up the parts of it that still function normally. People going to work, starting their routines, living lives that are only peripherally affected by the crisis. The disparity still strikes me. Normal life continuing while catastrophe unfolds kilometers away. Emily's awake, looking rough but functional. She's reviewing overnight developments, preparing briefing materials for the morning, maintaining the professional competence that's been our anchor through this crisis. I don't know what I'd do without her partnership in this work. 5:37. The sun's rising on the fifth day. The zone looks different in morning light after the airstrike. There's a visible crater where the industrial complex used to be, smoke still rising from burning debris. The destruction is obvious even from distance, a scar on the urban landscape that will persist long after the crisis ends. Survivor groups are reporting calm overnight, minimal infected activity, no coordinated attacks. The airstrike seems to have disrupted whatever was organizing the infected, reverting them to less dangerous behavior patterns. It's a tactical victory, but it doesn't solve the fundamental problem of thousands of infected still existing in the zone. The command center is planning another extraction operation for today, smaller scale than yesterday, targeting specific survivor groups that have been in contact and are ready for evacuation. They're also planning to drop supplies to groups that aren't ready for extraction but need support to continue holding their positions. 6:28. The experimental treatment has been cleared for wider distribution based on the successful trials. Military personnel are receiving prophylactic doses before entering high-risk situations. The protection isn't perfect. The treatment has to be administered within 60 minutes of exposure to be effective, but it's better than nothing. This changes the calculus for ground operations. A team equipped with treatment and prepared to administer it immediately after exposure can operate in the zone with acceptable risk levels. It means potential for systematic clearing operations, going building by building, eliminating infected and rescuing survivors in coordinated fashion. The first clearing operation is being planned for tomorrow. A Marine unit, fully equipped and briefed, will enter the zone at a designated point and clear a one-block area, eliminating all infected and extracting any survivors found. It's a test case for whether ground operations are viable at scale. 7:14. I'm watching news coverage on the monitors. The national media has fully descended on the story, reporters from every major outlet broadcasting from outside the quarantine zone. The images they're showing are dramatic: military perimeters, burning buildings in the distance, occasional glimpses of infected individuals wandering near the barriers. Some of the coverage is responsible, factual reporting on the crisis and response efforts. Some is sensationalist, focusing on the horror and fear while providing little useful information. Emily's been doing interviews with some outlets, trying to provide accurate information and combat misinformation. The international response is intensifying. Several countries have offered assistance, medical teams and supplies and expertise. Others are imposing stricter travel restrictions, essentially isolating our country until the crisis is resolved. The economic impact is mounting. Markets are unstable. There's talk of emergency economic measures, but all of that feels distant and abstract compared to the immediate reality of people trapped in the zone fighting for survival. Global economics matter. International relations matter, but not as much as the individual human lives being lost right now. 8:07. The extraction operation is beginning. 3 helicopters inbound to different locations, coordinated timing to spread military resources across multiple actions. It's a smaller operation than yesterday, but hopefully less risky given the reduced infected activity. First helicopter is approaching a survivor group sheltering in an office building. 14 people, including 2 children. They've secured the building well and have good defensive positions, but they're running out of food and one person needs medical attention for an infected wound. Not bite infection, just a regular injury that got infected through lack of proper treatment. The helicopter is landing on the roof. The survivors are climbing the building from the floor where they've been sheltering. No infected interference, no complications. They're boarding the helicopter smoothly, following the procedures, demonstrating the discipline that's kept them alive this long. All 14 extracted successfully. First mission complete without incident. It's almost anticlimactic after yesterday's dramatic rescues, but successful, boring missions are infinitely preferable to exciting, dangerous ones. 9:33. Second extraction encountered problems. The helicopter reached the designated pickup point to find only 5 survivors instead of the 15 who were supposed to be there. The group had been overrun during the night, 10 people killed or infected, the 5 survivors barely escaping to a nearby building. Helicopter was able to extract those 5, but it's a reminder that the situation inside the zone remains deadly despite the reduced infected activity. Survivors can still be overwhelmed, can still fall to infection or violence or simple bad luck. Every extraction is a race against deteriorating circumstances. The third extraction was canceled when the survivor group failed to respond to radio contact. Either their communications failed, or they're no longer in position to receive extraction, or they're no longer alive. The helicopter diverted to drop supplies at an alternate location where another group needed resupply. 10:26. I'm reviewing statistics that Emily compiled. Total confirmed survivors extracted since quarantine began, 187 people. Estimated survivors remaining in zone between 2 and 3,000. Total infected approximately 4,000 after the airstrike casualties. Total deceased unknown but likely exceeding 20,000. 20,000 dead in 5 days. That's massacre-level casualties, war zone numbers, the kind of loss that defines generations. And most of those deaths were preventable if the original smuggling operation had been intercepted, or if the compound had been properly secured, or if any of a dozen other things had gone differently. The investigation into who created the compound and how it was being smuggled is ongoing. Federal agencies are tracking leads, interviewing suspects, building cases for prosecution. But justice for criminal negligence doesn't resurrect the dead or cure the infected. It's cold comfort at best. 11:04. There's been a significant development. One of the infected individuals showing unusual behavior was captured during the night by a military special operations team. The infected female, who was standing at the perimeter, observing without attacking, was tracked and subdued using non-lethal methods. She's now in a secure medical facility being examined and tested. The goal is to understand why her behavior differs from standard infected, whether she's regaining cognitive function or never fully lost it, what makes her unique. She's also a candidate for the experimental treatment if they can determine whether it works on already infected individuals. The ethical questions are immense. She's technically alive, technically human, but she's infected and dangerous. Testing treatment on her without consent, keeping her restrained against her will if she has any will remaining. These are morally complex actions, but the potential knowledge gained could save thousands of lives. The lead researcher is documenting everything, ensuring there's a complete record of what's being done and why. Whatever happens with this test subject, future analysis can evaluate whether the actions were justified. Accountability matters even in crisis. 12:18 p.m. The captured infected individual is responding to stimuli in ways that suggest retained cognitive function. When shown photographs of people, she reacts emotionally to some and not others. When asked questions, she can't speak but sometimes nods or shakes her head appropriately. When given simple tasks, she can complete them with some difficulty. She's not fully human, not capable of complex thought or communication, but she's not mindless either. She's somewhere in between, a damaged mind struggling to function through the neurological chaos of infection. It's tragic and fascinating in equal measure. The researchers are preparing to administer the experimental treatment. If it can halt progression in someone already infected, if it can reverse some of the damage, it would be revolutionary. But the treatment was designed for prevention, not cure. There's no guarantee it will work, and significant risk it could worsen her condition. They're proceeding with full documentation and medical monitoring. Whatever happens, we'll learn something valuable about the infection and the treatment. That's how science works in crisis, taking risks to gain knowledge, hoping the benefits outweigh the cost. 1:43. The treatment has been administered to the captured infected individual. She's being monitored intensively, multiple medical teams watching for any change in condition or behavior. Early results are complicated. Her aggression has decreased significantly. Within 30 minutes of treatment, she stopped straining against restraints, stopped showing hostile responses to personnel, but she's also becoming less responsive overall, like the treatment is suppressing all activity rather than specifically targeting infected behavior. Blood tests show the compound levels dropping rapidly, similar to what was observed in prevention cases. But there's also evidence of cellular damage, tissue breakdown in neural structures. The infection did damage before being neutralized, and that damage might be permanent. The researchers are cautiously optimistic. If the treatment can consistently reduce aggression and halt progression even without full recovery, it could make infected individuals manageable. They could potentially be cared for in medical facilities rather than eliminated as threats. Not a cure, but it's better than nothing. 2:54. I'm seeing reports that other infected individuals are being captured for testing. Small teams using non-lethal weapons and protective equipment identifying infected that show behavioral anomalies, subduing and extracting them for examination. It's risky work but providing valuable data. Each captured infected is different. Some respond to treatment like the first subject, becoming less aggressive and more manageable. Others show no response or adverse reactions. The infection affects individuals differently based on exposure intensity, time since infection, individual biology. There's no one-size-fits-all solution, but patterns are emerging. Infected individuals caught early in the progression within 24 hours of initial exposure respond best to treatment. Those who have been infected longer show less benefit and more complications. The window for effective intervention appears to be narrow. This information is being distributed to military and medical personnel. The priority is capturing recently infected individuals who might benefit from treatment while continuing to eliminate long-term infected who are beyond help. It's grim triage but necessary for resource allocation. 3:37, Emily's showing me footage from inside the zone that a survivor uploaded. It's a video diary recorded over the last 5 days showing the progression of crisis from their perspective, the early confusion, the growing fear, the moment they realized they were trapped, the desperate survival that followed. The survivor who recorded this is a teacher named Marcus. He was at school when the quarantine began, locked down with about 30 students ranging from elementary to high school age. He's been trying to keep them calm, maintain routine, protect them from the horror outside. The video shows his exhaustion, his fear, his determination to save these children. The latest entry was recorded this morning. Marcus looks terrible, hasn't slept in days, barely holding himself together. He says they're out of food, down to their last bottles of water, surrounded by infected in the building. He's recorded goodbye messages to his family, prepared the older students for the possibility they might not make it. Then he sends the video out, hoping someone receives it. Emily's got the command center working on his location. The video metadata includes GPS coordinates. If we can get extraction to them quickly, those children might survive. It's a long shot, but it's worth trying. 4:21. An emergency extraction is being launched for Marcus and his students. 2 helicopters, one for extraction and one for covering fire, approaching the school location. It's not on the planned extraction list, but command authorized it based on the number of children involved. The helicopters are inbound. Marcus has been contacted via the radio network and told to get everyone to the roof. He's moving 30 terrified children up through a building with infected on multiple floors, trying to keep them quiet, keep them moving, keep them alive for just a few more minutes. I'm listening to the radio chatter. Marcus is talking to the helicopter pilot, reporting their progress. 3rd floor, 4th floor, passing infected that don't notice them because they're being quiet and slow. One child starts crying. Marcus has to calm them. Can't let fear spread to the others. 5th floor. The roof access is blocked by infected. Marcus has to clear them, has to fight while keeping children behind him and quiet. Other adults from the school staff are helping. Teachers and administrators who stayed behind fighting infected with improvised weapons while children huddle in the stairwell. The infected are down, the group is on the roof, the helicopter is coming in, descending toward the school. Marcus is organizing the children, getting the smallest ones ready to board first, maintaining order in chaos. This is what teachers do, protect their students, even when protection means standing between children and monsters. The helicopter is landing. Children are being loaded, lifted aboard by crew members, strapped in quickly. Marcus is counting, making sure all 30 are accounted for. 28, 29, 30. All aboard. Marcus is the last one on, pulling himself into the helicopter as it lifts off. They made it, all 30 children and the 4 adults who protected them. The helicopter is climbing away from the school, heading toward the perimeter and safety. Somewhere in that cabin, children are crying or cheering or just sitting in stunned silence, processing survival. Marcus is a hero. Kept 30 children alive for 5 days in a building with infected, maintained hope and discipline, got them all out when extraction came. He did his job under impossible circumstances and succeeded. That story needs to be told, needs to be remembered when we're accounting for how people responded to this crisis. 5:33. The sun setting on the 5th day. Another night approaching, another cycle of darkness and danger. But this night feels different somehow. Less desperate, more controlled. We have treatment that works. We've reduced the infected population significantly. We're extracting survivors successfully. Progress is visible. Emily's coordinating with the survivor network about tonight's plans. Most groups are maintaining defensive positions, conserving resources, waiting for extraction or resupply. The infected activity remains low, no signs of the coordinated behavior from yesterday. It's as close to stable as the situation has been since the crisis began. I'm thinking about all the people still inside the zone, hiding in darkness, hoping they survive another night. Thinking about the infected wandering the streets, lost to the infection, beyond help but still technically alive. Thinking about the soldiers maintaining the perimeter, the medical staff treating the wounded, the researchers working on better treatment. Everyone's playing their part, contributing what they can to managing this disaster. It's not enough to solve everything immediately, but it's enough to make progress to move toward eventual resolution. That has to be enough, because it's all we have. 6:42. Full darkness now. The zone is quieter than previous nights, fewer fires burning, less gunfire echoing through the streets, fewer emergency radio transmissions. Either the situation has stabilized or we've run out of people to cry for help. I'm hoping for the former but fearing the latter. Emily's reviewing plans for tomorrow's ground clearing operation. The Marine unit is being briefed now, going over maps and protocols, preparing equipment and treatment doses. It's ambitious but potentially transformative if successful. Actually going into the zone and systematically clearing it opens possibilities for comprehensive rescue and infection elimination. The operation is scheduled to begin at 0600 dawn insertion to maximize daylight operating time. The target area is a residential block in the eastern sector known to have survivors and moderate infected presence. Clear the infected, extract the survivors, secure the area, demonstrate that ground operations are viable. If it works, if the Marines can clear that block without excessive casualties or infection, the strategy can be scaled up. More units, more areas, systematic reclamation of the zone. We could potentially clear the entire zone in a week or two with sufficient resources and commitment. 7:33. I'm reading after-action reports from today's extraction operations, the detailed accounts of what helicopter crews and survivors experienced, the close calls and successful rescues and tragic losses. Each report is a story, a narrative of human beings under extreme stress making decisions with life and death consequences. One report from a pilot describes watching a survivor run toward his helicopter while infected pursued. The survivor tripped, fell, and the infected were about to reach them. The pilot made a split-second decision to stay on the ground. Let the survivor scramble aboard while infected clawed at the landing gear. The helicopter took minor damage, but the survivor lived. Another report from a crew chief describes having to physically pull an infected person off a survivor during boarding. The infected was strong, enhanced mutation, wouldn't let go. The crew chief broke the infected's arm, threw it off the helicopter, probably saved the survivor's life. He's matter of fact in the report, but you can read the trauma between the lines. These people are seeing and experiencing horrors that will mark them permanently. PTSD rates among response personnel are going to be catastrophic once this is over. We're creating a generation of trauma survivors who will need decades of support and treatment. 8:51. The captured infected individuals being treated are showing varied outcomes. Some are stabilizing, becoming less aggressive, potentially manageable in long-term care situations. Others are deteriorating despite treatment, the infection damage too extensive for reversal. A few have died as the treatment and infection fought for control of their cellular systems. The lead researcher is compiling data, building a profile of which infected individuals are good candidates for treatment and which are beyond help. Age factors in, younger individuals respond better. Time since infection matters. Recent infections respond better than old ones. Overall health pre-infection matters. Stronger immune systems seem to fight the infection more effectively with treatment support. It's complex medicine, personalized care at scale, trying to identify and prioritize treatment for individuals most likely to benefit. In an ideal world, everyone would receive treatment. In this world with limited resources and time, choices have to be made about who to save. 9:36. I'm receiving messages from listeners who've been following the broadcast since the beginning. People thanking me for staying on air, for providing reliable information, for being a steady presence while everything falls apart. Some are inside the zone, broadcasting messages to family outside. Others are outside, sharing what they're experiencing as they watch their city in crisis. One message that struck me was from a mother whose son is one of Marcus's students who was rescued today. She's been listening to my broadcast continuously, heard me report on the emergency extraction, learned that her son survived. She couldn't thank me enough for giving her that information, for helping her know her child was safe. That's why I'm doing this. Not for professional acclaim or personal glory, but to connect people with information they desperately need. To be the conduit between crisis and understanding, between fear and knowledge. If this broadcast has helped even one person make better decisions or find hope, it's been worth the exhaustion. 10:47. The command center is reporting that the infected population continues to decline. Combination of airstrike casualties, artillery eliminations, and natural attrition as some infected apparently burn out from the cellular damage. Current estimates is around 3,000 infected remaining, down from over 9,000 at peak. 3,000 is still a massive number, still represents thousands of former humans lost to infection. But it's manageable, potentially eliminable through systematic operations. The balance is shifting toward the possibility of actually winning this fight rather than just containing it. Survivor population estimates remain around 2 to 3,000, so roughly equal numbers of infected and uninfected still inside the zone. Every day that passes, every operation that succeeds, tips that balance slightly toward the uninfected, toward hope. 11:32. Emily's exhausted again, barely keeping her eyes open. I've convinced her to sleep for a few hours while I continue broadcasting. She resisted, wanting to maintain our partnership through the entire crisis, but she's running on empty and needs rest. I'm alone in the studio again, late-night vigil, watching the monitors and listening to the radio chatter and bearing witness to the ongoing crisis. The zone looks almost peaceful from outside, darkness hiding the horror, occasional lights flickering like the city is just sleeping rather than suffering. But I know what's happening out there, people hiding in fear, infected wandering in confusion, the dead unburied and the living barely surviving. The weight of that knowledge sits heavy, but I carry it because someone has to, because bearing witness is its own form of service. Midnight. 120 hours since the crisis began, 5 full days of emergency disaster crisis response. It feels like a lifetime and feels like it just started simultaneously. Time has lost normal meaning, compressed and expanded by the intensity of events. I'm tired. Bone deep, soul exhausted, running on fumes and determination. My voice is ragged, my thoughts are scattered, my body is begging for rest, but I keep going because the work isn't done, because people need this broadcast, because quitting isn't an option. How much longer can I maintain this? I don't know, but I'll find out when I reach my limit. Until then, I stay at the microphone, speaking truth to fear, providing light in darkness, doing what I can with what I have where I am. 12:53 a.m. There's movement at the perimeter again. Infected individuals approaching, but in small numbers. Individuals rather than masses. They're not attacking, just standing at the barriers, looking out at the soldiers, displaying that unusual behavior we've seen before. One infected individual is particularly persistent, standing at the same spot for nearly an hour, just watching. The soldiers have tried calling to it, asking if it understands, testing for any sign of retained cognition. The infected tilts its head, makes sounds that aren't quite words, but doesn't respond comprehensibly. Is there a person still in there somewhere? Is consciousness trapped behind the infection, aware but unable to communicate or control the body? The thought is horrifying. Being locked in your own body while infection drives your actions, being conscious of what you're doing but powerless to stop it. We don't know. The research hasn't addressed that question yet. But if it's true, if infected individuals retain some awareness, the ethical implications are staggering. We've been killing people who might still be inside their infected bodies, eliminating what we thought were mindless threats, but might be imprisoned minds. 144. I need to think about something else, anything else, before the existential horror paralyzes me. I'm looking at the statistics Emily prepared before she slept. Numbers and charts, quantifying the crisis in digestible data. Infection rate has declined from exponential growth to linear and is now approaching zero. New infections are rare, most occurring when survivors make mistakes rather than through unavoidable exposure. The treatment availability has essentially stopped new infection spread among personnel. Mortality rate among infected who don't receive treatment, 98% within 7 days of exposure. The infection burns through the body too quickly for natural survival. The 2% who survive longer are the enhanced mutations, bodies that adapted to the infection rather than being consumed by it. Mortality rate among infected who receive treatment within the first 24 hours, 43%. Better than nothing, but still representing massive loss of life. The treatment helps but isn't a miracle cure. Recovery rate, meaning return to normal cognitive function after treatment, 11%. Most treated individuals survive but remain damaged, limited incapacity requiring long-term care. Full recovery is rare and usually occurs only in cases of minimal exposure treated immediately. The numbers are grim, but they're numbers, quantifiable, understandable, providing framework for decision-making. Better to work with data than with fear and speculation. 231. The perimeter is quiet now. The infected individuals who were observing have wandered away back into the zone. The soldiers remain at their posts, vigilant but relaxed. No immediate threats to respond to. Inside the zone, the survivor groups are maintaining their positions, occasional radio chatter, people checking in with each other, maintaining the communication network. Some groups report hearing infected movement but no direct encounters. Others report complete silence, no infected nearby, just empty streets and dark buildings. The calm is suspicious. After days of chaos and violence, the sudden quiet feels ominous rather than reassuring. Like the eye of a storm, temporary peace before the next wave of destruction. But maybe I'm catastrophizing. Maybe the situation really has stabilized and this is what the new normal looks like. 3:26, dawn's a few hours away. I should try to get some rest before the ground operation begins, but I don't want to miss anything, don't want to abandon the broadcast. Emily's sleeping soundly in the break room. Someone should be awake and monitoring, maintaining vigilance. I'm making more coffee, strong and black, chemically maintaining consciousness. My hands are shaking slightly from exhaustion and caffeine overload. My thoughts are getting fuzzy, connections between ideas becoming loose and associative rather than logical. But I can keep going. I've pushed through worse, endured longer, survived things that should have broken me. This is just another test of endurance, another challenge to overcome through stubbornness and refusal to quit. 4:17. The first hints of dawn are appearing in the eastern sky. That pale glow that promises sunrise, that transition from night to day that happens regardless of human concerns. The sun rises on the devastated and the thriving equally, indifferent to our suffering and survival. I'm watching the zone in the pre-dawn light, seeing shapes emerge from darkness as visibility improves. The destruction is more visible now, collapsed buildings and burned areas showing stark against intact structures. The zone looks wounded, like a piece of the city that's been cut out and left to decay. But there's movement too. Survivors stirring, beginning their routines, preparing for another day. Infected wandering, aimless but persistent, continuing to exist despite everything. Life persists, even corrupted and damaged life, finding ways to continue against all odds. 5:03. Emily's awake, looking somewhat refreshed by a few hours of sleep. She's reviewing overnight developments, preparing for the day ahead. The ground operation is scheduled to begin in less than an hour. This could be a turning point, the moment we transition from defensive containment to offensive clearing. I fill Emily in on the quiet night, the unusual infected behavior at the perimeter, the continued calm inside the zone. She's cautiously optimistic that we've turned a corner, that the worst might be behind us. I want to share that optimism, but years of journalism have trained me to expect complications. 5:51. The Marine unit is moving into position. 20 highly trained personnel, full combat equipment, enough treatment doses for every team member plus extras for survivors they encounter. They're approaching the insertion point at the eastern edge of the zone, preparing to cross the perimeter and enter infected territory. This is it. The first deliberate ground insertion since the quarantine began. If they succeed, if they clear that block and extract survivors without excessive casualties, it validates the entire strategy. If they fail, if they get overwhelmed or suffer mass infection, it sets back clearing operations indefinitely. I'm watching through drone feeds, seeing the Marines stage at the perimeter, final equipment checks, final briefings. They're professionals trained for combat in hostile environments, but this is unlike anything in their training. Fighting humans is one thing. Fighting infected humans, things that used to be civilians, is something else entirely. 600 hours, the operation begins. The Marines cross the perimeter, entering the zone in tactical formation, weapons ready, moving with purpose and coordination. Their objective is 3 blocks into the zone, a residential area where survivors have been detected. They're advancing carefully, clearing each structure as they pass, eliminating infected encountered, marking cleared areas for follow-up. The first infected contact happens within minutes. 2 infected individuals wandering a street intersection, clean shots, both down, confirmed eliminated. The Marines keep moving. More infected appear, drawn by the gunfire. The Marines establish a firing line, systematic elimination, controlled aggression. 10 infected down, 15-20. The Marines are rotating positions to manage ammunition and maintain fresh shooters. It's textbook urban combat executed perfectly. First block cleared. No casualties, multiple infected eliminated, no survivors encountered yet. The Marines push forward to Block 2, maintaining formation, communicating constantly, covering each other's movements. Professional warriors doing what they're trained to do. 6:43. Second block is more challenging. Infected are present in larger numbers, maybe 50 scattered through the area. The Marines split into two teams, clearing buildings simultaneously while maintaining mutual support. It's slower but more thorough, reducing risk of missing infected or survivors. Contact inside a building. Infected on multiple floors, team has to clear room by room while managing threats above and below their position. It's close quarters combat, intense and dangerous, exactly the kind of situation where infection risk is highest. One Marine is grabbed by an infected that was hiding in a closet. His teammates shoot the infected off him, check him for bites or scratches. He's got some scratches but no penetration, just surface damage. Treatment is administered immediately as precaution. He's back in action within minutes. The building is clear. 3 infected eliminated, no survivors found. The team continues to the next structure, maintaining pace, working through the block systematically. It's exhausting work, physically and mentally demanding, but they're executing flawlessly. 7:36. Both blocks cleared. The Marines have eliminated approximately 90 infected, secured the area, and found survivors in 2 locations. 7 survivors total, extracted safely and being escorted back to the perimeter for medical screening and debriefing. The operation is a success. Clear objectives achieved, minimal casualties, demonstrated viability of ground clearing operations. The Marines are returning to the perimeter. Mission complete, ready to debrief and share lessons learned for future operations. This is the model going forward. Systematic clearing, building by building, block by block, eliminating infected and extracting survivors until the zone is secured. It will take time, weeks probably, but it's achievable. We can actually reclaim the zone and end this crisis. 8:21. The Marines have exited the zone and the survivors they rescued are being processed. Medical screening, decontamination, interviews for intelligence gathering. The survivors report that infected activity in their area had been declining over the last day, making it easier to hide and conserve resources. The Marine unit is debriefing, reviewing what worked and what didn't, identifying improvements for future operations. Overall assessment is positive. The operation met all objectives and proved the concept. More units will be trained and equipped for clearing operations beginning immediately. Within 48 hours, they expect to have multiple teams operating simultaneously, clearing different sectors of the zone in coordinated fashion. The timeline for complete zone clearance is estimated at 10 to 14 days, assuming resources and personnel are available to maintain operational tempo. It's an end date. Not certain, not guaranteed, but an actual timeline for resolution. After 5 days of crisis with no end in sight, having a target date for completion is psychologically powerful. It gives people hope, gives them something to hold on to, proves that this nightmare is finite. 9:07. Emily's coordinating with the survivor network to prioritize areas for clearing operations. Locations where survivors are concentrated get priority, followed by areas with high infected density. Then systematic clearing of remaining territory. The goal is to maximize survivor rescue while minimizing infected population as quickly as possible. The survivor network is providing intelligence on infected movements, concentrations, behavioral patterns they've observed. This grassroots intelligence is incredibly valuable, complementing drone surveillance and signal intercepts with on-the-ground observation from people who've been living in the zone and learning its rhythm. Some survivor groups are requesting permission to assist with clearing operations. They're armed, they're experienced fighting infected, they want to contribute to liberating their neighborhoods. The military is considering this request but concerned about coordinating civilian fighters alongside professional soldiers. The compromise is using survivor groups for security and support roles rather than direct combat. They can hold cleared areas, provide local knowledge, help identify and extract other survivors. It leverages their capabilities while keeping them out of the most dangerous operations. 10:33. The national media is reporting on the successful ground operation, framing it as a major turning point in the crisis. The coverage is generally positive, highlighting the bravery of the Marines and the hope this provides for eventual resolution. Some outlets are being more cautious, noting that one successful operation doesn't guarantee future success. International reaction is mixed. Some countries are praising our response efforts and offering additional support. Others are critical of how long it took to implement ground operations, suggesting that earlier action could have prevented some casualties. There's truth in that criticism, but it ignores the risks and complexities of operating in an infected zone. The political implications are already being debated. Who's responsible for the crisis? Who responded well? Who failed in their duties? There will be investigations, hearings, possibly prosecutions, but that's future work. Right now, the focus has to remain on ending the crisis and saving whoever can be saved. 11:51. I'm approaching my limit. 6 days on air with minimal rest sustained by coffee and adrenaline and stubborn refusal to quit. But the adrenaline is depleting, the coffee's not working anymore, and my body is staging a revolt against continued abuse. Emily sees it, knows I need real rest before I collapse completely. She's insisting I take at least a few hours off, let another broadcaster cover while I sleep. I'm resisting, but I know she's right. I'm making mistakes, slurring words, losing coherence. Better to step away gracefully than collapse on air. We're lining up coverage, pulling in a colleague who's been monitoring the crisis and is prepared to take over. He'll maintain the broadcast while I rest, continuing the flow of information that's been our mission since this began. The work continues even when I can't. 12:32 p.m. I'm signing off for a few hours. My colleague David is taking over the broadcast. Emily will support him the way she's supported me, providing research and coordination and the institutional knowledge we've built over these days. You're in good hands. To everyone listening, thank you for staying with us through this crisis. Thank you for trusting us to provide accurate information during the most difficult days our city has faced. Stay safe, stay informed, and remember that help is coming. The zone will be cleared. Survivors will be rescued. This nightmare will end. This is Daniel Rothman on 104.7 FM, stepping away but not stepping down. We'll get through this together.